10 Sports in this June 29th, 2023 episode. Appreciate you joining us. It is Scout School Thursdays, so Recruiting 101's Josh Murphy will join us here probably at the bottom of the hour, 7:30, 7:40-ish. I would say 8:30, 8:40-ish for you people on the East Coast. So he'll be joining us. We have 3 new guys I'm excited about. 2 offensive guys. We got a quarterback. We got a wide receiver. We kind of got a guy you may remember from about 10 years ago, defensive end, defensive tackle, line up at the 5 tech, line up at the 3 tech, hybrid guy you'll probably remember from one of these SEC schools too as well. So we got 3 guys to show you just like last week. Me and Josh are going to talk through it, go a little bit more in detail with scouting this week. Then I'm going to go over biggest trap game. Everybody has them. Biggest trap game for every SEC team heading into the 2023 season. Now, this isn't necessarily a lot. I'm thinking you're going to lose. This is a game that potentially sets up weird on the schedule. It could be after about 8. Some of the teams in the SEC, you'll find out when I'm going over this, have bye weeks later in the season, about like week 8. So you're going week 8. We got a team that has 4 straight. Arkansas is about 4 straight road games or 4 straight weeks where they're away from Fayetteville. So you're gone 4 straight weeks. You can be a little tired, looking forward to that bye week the next week. It's not necessarily a loss. It's just a game every team should be cautious of because where it fits on the schedule, where they're at that time of the year, and overall how big of a game do they have the next week. For example, if Texas A&M, Alabama are playing the next week, how is Texas A&M going to react to the Tennessee game? I'm not saying that's one of them. It's just an example of what I'm saying. So it's not necessarily a loss. And going into the season, I may pick one of these games as a loss. But right now, it's just a game to keep an eye on for your favorite team to kind of, hey, make sure let's don't trip, let's don't stumble, let's make sure we have our shoes tied. Let's make sure because every week in the SEC, as we know, it's a grind. Moving on, the SEC ACC Basketball Challenge, something starting new this upcoming season for the 23-24 basketball season. They announced those matchups yesterday. Some highs, some lows. I thought they got about half of them right. I'll talk to you a little bit more in detail about those matchups, where they went right, where they went wrong, and I'll give you my matchups of the 14 games that they would have had as well. So I'll go over that. But as you know, we're always going to update you on the portal. Now, not a lot of basketball news, college basketball, but it's about to be July 1st, and we're talking about college basketball roster updates. That's crazy. That's crazy in today's time. But we still got a couple of roster spots left on a couple SEC teams, specifically Alabama and Nate Oates. 2 spots left. They're bringing in 2 guys from the same school. Remember, Bob Huggins got fired, opened up some guys leaving from West Virginia. So we got Muhammad Wagi, former JUCO All-American power forward, 6'10", 225, probably play the 5 spot as well. Ton of upside. I think a little bit more Charles Bediako, but more athletic on the offensive end, but you're going to give up some on the defensive end. Not that he'd be bad, but it's just for the Alabama fans listening out there for a comparison. And then also Joe Toussaint, the veteran guard, can provide depth to the Alabama backcourt after losing Javon Quinterly on Sunday night. So that's where we're at from a basketball standpoint. Rosters are kind of getting locked in, but we still got a team like Alabama in the SEC has 2 spots left. We'll see what they do. Do they use them on both? I think they would take both. They can get one. They'll probably just save it, use it for a guy like Aiden Sherrill as a mid-year enrollee like they did for Davin Cosby next year. So that's something to keep an eye on out there. Also, moving on to college baseball real quick. Moving to the college baseball transfer portal. I'm just going to run through the list here. We'll get more in depth as the weeks go on. But real quick, Tennessee probably got the biggest pickup of the week. NC State transfer catcher Cannon Peebles, massive freshman, batted .352, 11 doubles, 12 home runs last year. Big pickup for Tony Vitello in Tennessee. They needed a little bit more offensive play at the catcher position. They had a great defensive catcher last year. They need a little bit more stick. Alabama added 2 very good hitters from the Big Ten. One in Rutgers outfielder. We talked about this last week. Evan Slate and the other former Rob Vaughn player, another outfielder as well. Ian Patrute over the weekend, or I think about 2 days ago, actually. Georgia added Baylor shortstop Colby Brandt. He was about the only thing that was a positive for the Baylor Bears this past year. And former Sam Houston State outfielder Clayton Chadwick. With Sebastian Morello back at shortstop for the Bulldogs, it'll be interesting to see, does Colby Brandt, the Baylor transfer, does he go to second? He played shortstop for the Bears. Probably he'll play middle infield, but I'm guessing second base. Vanderbilt doesn't go to the transfer portal much. Tim Corbin and the boys don't go to the transfer portal much, but they're trying to get their inner Paul Skeens here. They went and got a guy from Air Force right-handed pitcher Sawyer Hawks. I mean, he's not going to be Paul Skeens, but they're hoping. But again, Vanderbilt usually doesn't go into the portal. They're a homegrown organization. It's worked for them. But again, they're dabbling in the portal. Ole Miss picked up a commitment from Southeastern Louisiana right-hander Connor Spencer. You can tell we're getting a little pitching. A lot of people getting some pitching from the portal. Kentucky went down to the D2 level and brought in right-handed pitcher Logan Martin from Erskine College in South Carolina. I had to look it up to see where it was at. It's in South Carolina, though. Opponents batted 123 against him last year. Very impressive. Let's see if it translates up 2 levels. Kentucky. Also, just mentioned them, Logan Martin, sorry. Texas A&M went to San Diego, picked up San Diego State transfer right-hander Eldridge Armstrong. Good pickup for Slosh and the boys. And then Florida going back to the well, baby. Coastal Carolina. It brought them B.T. Rypel, their catcher this past year, one of the most clutch hitters in college baseball this past year. He came to Florida from Coastal Carolina. Florida goes back to that well and goes and gets Coastal Carolina catcher Tanner Garrison to replace B.T. Rypel after this year. Hey, if it works the first time, why not go back? And then some guys to watch. Chase Burns, the Tennessee closer, wants more of a wants to get more into the rotation like he was for Tennessee at the beginning of the year. Here in TCU, maybe, be on the lookout for TCU out of that. You also got LSU, and I even heard Auburn a little bit. Butch Thompson and the boys. They don't have a pitching coach right now, but it'll be interesting. But TCU is kind of the hot name I was hearing today. And look out. I know Wake Forest was the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. This year had a great season. Some of their guys are looking. That's what I'm hearing. So, a lot of the SEC, all 14 teams in the SEC will be looking forward to that, or really 16 next year. We added Oklahoma and Texas. But that's where we're at from the transfer portal. A lot of baseball news. Updating you with basketball, though, just really updated on Alabama with 2 roster spots left. But transitioning from the portal, we're going to stay with college basketball. SEC ACC Challenge was announced yesterday. Just some thought the bottom matchups were okay. I thought some of the bottom of the league, where there are 14 matchups announced, but the bottom matchups were not bad, honestly. I think most teams would agree with that. I think the upper tier matchups leave a lot to be desired. And some of that is the ACC's fault. A lot of their blue bloods at Syracuse, not any good right now. It's be the first time in a while without Jim Boeheim, I think since 1976. Louisville, not even in the challenge. It's a team that won the 2013 national championship, not even in the challenge. Hit or miss a little bit. Notre Dame, if you want to say. Mike Bray's gone. This is their first season in a while without Mike Bray. So some of it's the ACC's fault. If some of those teams were better, I think you would have seen some better matchups against some of the better SEC teams. And you got to factor in Florida State and Virginia Tech have been pretty good recently in the ACC here, especially Florida State with Leonard Hamilton. They were terrible last year. Virginia Tech missed the tournament I think they've gone to the tournament 6 out of the last 8 years or something. They weren't very good last year, but again, they match up with Auburn. People aren't overly fired up about that tier of the matchup. But again, I thought they did good with the bottom tier matchups. We'll get to them, RB2. Some of the upper tier, I think you're going to agree with me and be like, it could have been a little better. So let's take a look at the matchups here. Now, some things have changed. Now, remember the SEC Big 12 Challenge, it started in 2013. That happened in the middle of January. Remember, that would always be in the middle of conference play. The thing they changed with this is going to be before conference play starts. So these are 2 days matched up, Tuesday, November 28th, and Wednesday, November 29th. So the week after Thanksgiving, after those Thanksgiving tournaments, they'll pop at this. I like this is before conference play. I never really liked it. We just stopped in the middle of the conference play and we played this random non-conference game. Never really liked it. I think this is going to be better. So the Tuesday matches, they already got dates and times for this. So the first one, LSU at Syracuse. I'm okay with that. Right now, Syracuse is obviously the traditional program, but no Jim Boeheim for the first time since 1976. I think LSU did a solid job. Matt McMahon, this is big for him. Every other sport at LSU right now is winning. The pressure just went up a lot on Matt McMahon, even a little bit on our guy, Brian Kelly, just being honest. LSU starting to become that point. You don't start winning a national championship in 2 or 3 years, Brian Kelly. They'll be on you, a little bit off topic, but it's really on Matt McMahon because they were so poor last year. But I think he did a good job bringing in Tulane point guard, Jalen Cook, and then the Vanderbilt transfer, do it all for Vanderbilt at the end of the year, Jordan Wright. He's on the team now. Next game right here. This is also Tuesday, November 28th. I'm actually a little fired up for this game. Under the radar. Missouri at Pitt. Don't mind this matchup. Pretty underrated matchup. Remember, Pitt lost in the round of 32 against Xavier. They beat Mississippi State in the opening round game, or the play-in game last year. As we know, Missouri, really good first year for Dennis Gates. This is an interesting matchup. I'm not overly fired up about Missouri's roster right now. Really interested to see what Dennis Gates does with that. I think he's going to earn his paycheck if they're really good make the tournament this year. But I think off some of last year's results, that's a pretty solid matchup. Some other Tuesday games, Mississippi State at Georgia Tech. Damon Stoudemire, the new head coach at Georgia Tech. It'll be him. State should be pretty good. They got their top 5 scorers back, 4 to 5 starters. Toulouse Smith back, DJ Jeffries, Matthews is back. The more kids back. Mississippi State's going to be pretty good if they can develop a little bit more offensively. That's what they're going to need. Not overly upset about this matchup. You'll probably, it's on a Tuesday, but there should be a good amount of Mississippi State fans from the Atlanta area. What else did you want them to do here? At some point, people got to play other people. So I'm not getting upset with these kind of matchups. Moving on, Notre Dame at South Carolina. If you're South Carolina, you're kind of fired up. Notre Dame wasn't great last year, but they made the round of 32 the year before. No Mike Bray, like I mentioned early. Micah Shrewsbury, the Penn State head coach, took the job at Notre Dame. A big year for Lamont Paris, though. You got G.G. Jackson drafted last year. They had some moments. They could have beat Alabama, lost in overtime. But again, you got to step up. People's patience with the amount coaches are making now and from the transfer portal, because he's got to have a bubble year, I think, or his seat's going to be really hot going into the third year. Interesting matchup here. Don't really dislike this matchup, but I think they could have done a little more with it. I think this is where people were a little rubbed wrong with how they went about the matchups, I should say. Miami at Kentucky. We're still staying on Tuesday, November 28th. Miami travels to Rupp Arena. I actually don't mind this game. I think the Jim Onega, Cal storyline is going to be good. I think they could have mixed these matches up. I was interested. I would have bet $1 million they put Kentucky Duke or North Carolina Duke together. Probably more North Carolina Duke, because I do like the Duke Arkansas matchup. But again, not upset with the Miami Kentucky matchup. It's different, but I think they could have went another direction. That's just one man's opinion. But I'm just going to leave it at that. NC State at Ole Miss. This is still a Tuesday, November 28th game. Very under the radar game here. The Pack have 2 solid starters back from an NCAA tournament team that lost to Creighton last year. And I think Chris Beard was the best hire in the entire offseason in college basketball. I was one of the few people standing on the table where I know the off-the-field stuff, but he's not paid for that. He's not paid for that. It's going to bring in extra money to the university. He'll probably be out of here in 3-4 years. But if you can get Chris Beard, if you're Ole Miss, you had to. You had to go get it done. I know the AD, Keith Carter, was not very fired up about it, just from stuff that I heard. But you had to get done. You're going to win on the court. Chris Beard is the best hire the entire offseason. I expect the Rebels to be pretty good next year. I'm fringe 6th or 7th in the SEC bubble team. I think maybe Mississippi State next year, but a little bit more offensive power. But I think both Mississippi teams are honestly going to be pretty good. It's going to be a fun matchup at the Pavilion, honestly. NC State, solid team. Mississippi State, Ole Miss. I think this is a good matchup, them pairing here. I like this one. Now, this is the next game. This is my least favorite one, the last matchup on these Tuesday, November 28th. Remember, we're talking ACC or SEC ACC challenge, the new challenge. No more SEC Big 12 challenge, and this ACC SEC challenge will start the week after Thanksgiving. So this will not interrupt conference play. But the last one on Tuesday that I'm not fired up for, Clemson at Alabama. This isn't football, guys. This isn't football. Worst game of all in terms of potential, in my opinion. Clemson coming in off an NIT appearance. We know about Alabama, the number 1 overall seed last year. Swept the SEC, lost in the Sweet 16. I think they could have given Alabama a better opponent. I'll tell you who here in a minute. Moving on to Wednesday's matchup. Remember, they split them up 2 days. Wednesday is November 29th. Tennessee at North Carolina. Another solid game. Tennessee should be really good. The Rick Barnes, North Carolina potential. Carolina should be improved. Hubert Davis. I like this matchup. This will be fun. Tennessee going to Tobacco Road. This will be fun in the Dean Dome. I don't blame them for this. I probably would have matched up North Carolina, Kentucky for better matchups overall. Texas A&M at Virginia. This is going to be the first of 60 wins. 2 teams that don't really score a lot of points. I think this is one of those games that have a domino effect on the other games in a negative way. I think this is the one where they really messed up, where if they went a couple other directions, we could have had some better matchups at the top, like I keep mentioning. But not a bad matchup. I like Buzz Williams. I like Tony Bennett. So we'll see that. Florida at Wake Forest. I think Florida brought in, I think they upgraded their roster just as good as anybody from their standard, from their point of view from last year, better than anybody in the SEC. I think we could have got them with a little bit better than Wake Forest. But again, the ACC is a little down right now. Hadn't been what the SEC's been the last 3 years, so you had to make up for it somewhere. Duke at Arkansas, they did it right here. Hit a grand slam here. It's going to be at Bud Walton Arena, 1994 National Championship rematch. It's be a really Duke eliminated Arkansas in Coach K's last year, 2 years ago, to go to the Final Four. Knocked down Arkansas back-to-back Elite 8 appearances. Awesome matchup. Could not have done better. Bud Walton is going to be freaking rocking, dude. It's going to be rocking. Duke's going to be preseason number 1 with their top 5 transfer class, number 1 overall high school recruiting class. This is going to be a fun matchup. It's going to be a really, really fun matchup. Virginia Tech at Auburn. It's another matchup that could have tweaked a little bit more. Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. I'll tell you my matchups right after this, and you'll know what I'm talking about when I get to it. And then the last two games I didn't really mind. You got to play who did Georgia at Florida State. Solid job pairing this up. If Florida State were a bit better, I think they would have gotten the higher echelon. Maybe playing Alabama, maybe somebody that I don't dislike this. I don't dislike this matchup. And then finally, I saw some people complaining about this one. I don't really mind this one either. Boston College at Vanderbilt. At this point, it's the best they could have done. But here's how I would have done it. Here's mine. I would have went Kentucky, North Carolina. Hear me out. Arkansas, Duke. They had that one. I like it. Alabama, Miami. That's where I would have switched it up. I would have liked that. Jim Larinaga and the boys coming to Tuscaloosa. That'd been a fun matchup. Very up-tempo. I know Miami lost Isaiah Wong. Bama's got a lot of new additions. That just would have been a fun style play right there. Maybe even Alabama, Virginia. But I like Alabama, Miami. Auburn, Virginia. Let's have the Final Four rematch. The last-second foul in Auburn. Virginia sinks most of their free throws, goes on, beats Texas Tech for the national championship. Great college basketball game. We could have seen that again. But no, we're not there. I would have had Auburn, Virginia. Tennessee, Clemson. I know that's a lot of orange, but I think that would have been a decent matchup. Texas A&M, Virginia Tech. Let's get Buzz Williams against his old team. Why not? I told you I didn't like Virginia Tech, Auburn. Didn't really like Texas A&M, Virginia. I think it would have been something. Buzz Williams against his old team. He was there for a while. Kind of got him off the mat, Virginia Tech. I would have liked that matchup. Florida versus Notre Dame. I know Wake Forest. We could have got a little bit better name. Micah Shrewsbury's first year at Notre Dame. I think we could have got a better matchup. I would have liked Florida, Notre Dame. South Carolina, Wake Forest, the old ACC foes. Let's switch that up a little bit. I wouldn't have minded that. And then we get into some matchups they already had. Remember, I liked half of them. Georgia, Florida State, I would have kept. Vanderbilt, Boston College, I would have kept. Ole Miss, NC State, I would have kept that. Mississippi State, Georgia Tech, I would have kept. LSU, Syracuse, you got to match them up with somebody. Syracuse isn't what they used to be. First year without Jim Boeheim. Not that they've really been great with him recently, but first year. And then Missouri Pitt, another underrated game. It's two NCAA tournament teams going at it. So just think at the top of it, so people complain, really where Alabama was situated against Clemson, just a boring matchup. It's almost like, hey, man, maybe we'll draw some football fans who think it's a playoff game. Just lazy. And also, too, the game's at 8:30 Central Time Zone on a Tuesday after the week of Thanksgiving. Come on. They could have done better in there. But again, I like the bottom half. Top tier could have been a lot better. Transition in there. Taking a break for a minute. I did notice, I hope everybody is not melting. It is steaming here in Oxford, Mississippi. I looked around for a lot of places that listen to the show. Nashville's hot. New Orleans is hot. Houston's near 100. Austin's near 100. What else did I look at? Memphis, high 90s. Atlanta, you were looking like it was a cool, brisk day at 90. So everybody, all the cities that are listening to Mach 10 Sports, I'm wishing you well. It's hot here too. I think our air conditioner is hot. So if you see some perspiration coming down, that is why. But that is not. But we're not going to stop the show for that. The show rolls on. The show rolls on, baby. It's exactly what Jordan Belfort said. Wolf of Wall Street. Wolf of Wall Street reference. If you don't know what I mean, if you listen to the show, you probably did. Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort. The show rolls on. But going on. Speaking of rolling on. Biggest trap game for every SEC team before we get my guy Josh Murphy on. Now, again, this is not predicting losses. It's just you need to be careful if you're looking at this when you're predicting your team season. Like, where does these games fit on the schedule? Is it after a tough stretch? Is it before a bye week? Does the team playing you here that's the trap game, do they have a bye week after you've played about 5 straight games? We'll get to it. Let's start off with the SEC West. Alabama, you're going to call me crazy. Call me crazy out there. At Kentucky on November 11th, week 11. Week after LSU, where the West is likely going to be determined. Texas A&M. You'll hear that as we keep getting later on. For everybody out there thinking it's just Alabama, LSU right now, be careful. Texas A&M could sneak up. But again, for the people out there just reading the random media posts, well, let's just say the Alabama LSU game is going to be for the West. Well, they got to go to Kentucky the next week. I think Kentucky's be pretty good if they get their offensive line figured out. I like Devin Leary. They have weapons on the outside. They have weapons on that. Tavian Robinson, Barian Brown, Dane Key. They got weapons. It's going to be cold in Lexington. I mean, what is that, November 11th? It's going to be cold. It's going to be cold. Basketball season's about to tip. It probably has. It's going to be cold. But traditionally, Alabama struggled in this game. This is usually where the Mississippi State game used to be, and Bama used to be tired after the LSU game because it was physical, or both real physical on both sides of the line of scrimmage. From about 2007 to about 2 years ago, this was just a bunch of war dad. The LSU game was a war daddy game, and still now, just guys going at it, exhausted the next week. You could go see LSU would struggle against Arkansas the next week, and Bama would usually beat Mississippi State because they hadn't lost to them since 2007. But it would be a struggle and they would get through it. But now it's Kentucky. Mississippi State moved up on the schedule. Now I think Kentucky's going to be pretty good. Not saying Bama's going to lose this game. It better be on what? I'm telling you, better watch out. It's a game, not saying they're going to lose, but it's a trap game for sure. Moving to Fayetteville, Arkansas. I think their trap game is Mississippi State at home on October 21st, Week 8. So Mississippi State comes to Fayetteville October 21st, Week 8. Arkansas has one of the later bye weeks in the league. Listen to this. This is what I'm talking about, where this fits into the schedule. This is where the context is provided. Coming off 4 straight road games to Baton Rouge, Arlington, where they play Texas A&M, the neutral site every year, Oxford and Tuscaloosa. They come back right before the bye week for Mississippi State. They're going to be exhausted. I don't care who you are. You're not coming into that game after that stretch unscathed or at least somewhat beat up. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Take into account some guys could be looking ahead to the bye week, like I mentioned, and Mississippi State's coming off the bye week. This is the definition of a trap game to me. Just trying to get through it. Man, Coach Pittman, we've been on the road so long. Man, I want to go home, get some of my mama's cooking. I'm tired, man. I just need a break a little bit. We hadn't stopped since fall camp. You look ahead. I'm telling you, Mississippi State's a little dangerous this year. New coach, I know, but there's not going to be a lot of transition on defense. All those guys are back. Most of them, except the corners. I'm saying the coaching staff's back. There's not going to be any transition from a schematic standpoint. Now, they should get the offense stepped up with Kevin Barbay, but they got Will Rogers back, and I think he's going to be fine. It's a dangerous game for Arkansas, especially after that schedule of going to Baton Rouge, Arlington, Oxford, and Tuscaloosa. And then this game right before the break for the bye week, it smells a little dangerous to me. Auburn. We just talked about it. I think it's Mississippi State again. It's Mississippi State's the sleeper team this year in the SEC. I see people predicting them to finish last in the West, and I really don't get it. Mississippi State home, October 28th, Week 9. Mississippi State sets up nice on people's schedule this year, and for their own sake. Mississippi State, it's a little bit of break. The week after back-to-back games, they get Auburn goes back-to-back games against LSU and the big one against Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin coming to town. Hugh Freeze, Lane Kiffin, we know that's going to be a top 3 SEC game this year. Not really maybe because of their records, but just because Lane Kiffin has poked the bear so much. Both guys were going after the Auburn job. Lane Kiffin messed around a little bit. Some say Hugh Freeze cost them their job. They don't really like each other. So there's going to be a lot put into this from a preparation standpoint. It'll be interesting the next week. It'll really be really interesting from the next week from that standpoint. Auburn's going to be banged up a little bit to this extent. Not saying they're going to lose, but would not be shocked if they lost to Mississippi State after 2 big games, going to Baton Rouge, and the big one against Ole Miss at the left circle. I know Hugh Freeze and that staff will have that circle. And then Mississippi State comes rolling in. I don't know, and I'm looking at it right now, and Mississippi State has Arkansas and Fayetteville before. So I got the back-to-back games these teams don't need to be sleeping on. Biggest trap games, back-to-back weeks. I got Mississippi State. Guarantee you Mississippi State's going to get one of those games. Would be shocked if they do not get one of those games. Moving to LSU. People who historically know about this game are going to call me crazy. The last time this team went into Tiger Stadium and won was just the last time they were there. The Auburn Tigers. LSU's biggest trap game to me is Auburn at home on October 14th. That would be Week 7. LSU's 7th straight game. Remember, I'm factoring in bye weeks where this sets up on the schedule. Auburn's coming off a bye week. Auburn's unknown. I think Auburn and Ole Miss, 2 big unknowns. They brought so many new transfer portal additions. It'll be real interesting to see what these teams really do look like. It's tough to project right now, but I do know this. Hugh Freeze is a top 10 coach in college football. He's won everywhere he's been. His Arkansas State days, Ole Miss, Liberty. He's going to win at Auburn. He was a much better fit than Lane Kiffin. He's going to win at Auburn. He's going to get a big win this year. He's going to get a big win. Is it in Baton Rouge? They beat Bama at home. He's going to get a big win this year. He just is. It's just Hugh Freeze has always won. You may not like the guy. You may not like his off-the-field stuff that he did. We're not going to get into that. But the guy wins football games. That's what he's paid to do. Does it at a high level. So Hugh Freeze is going to get one of these big wins this year. I'm just telling you right now. Will it be in Baton Rouge, though? So I'm looking kind of at a schedule right now. It wouldn't be the craziest thing I've ever seen. I just know he's going to get one. I can guarantee you this. And again, not guaranteeing this is a loss for LSU, but it's one they need to keep their head on a swivel for and watch out for. Because it's 7 straight games. Ole Miss. Biggest sleeper matchup biggest trap game of the year for the Ole Miss Rebels. Vanderbilt at home on October 28th, Week 9. The week after the sure-to-be-filled drama game at Auburn, I keep bringing that game up, Vanderbilt comes to town the week after the Auburn game. Vandy's dangerous here, in my opinion. Now, it's going to depend what the doors are. They 5-1, 4-2 coming to this game. They're 5-1. They're playing for a bowl game here. They're going to be fired up. 4-2 still. They got plenty of chances down the stretch to get the win. So I think this can be a big game for Vandy, and they know this is one they can maybe still on the road. This is the least exciting game for the Rebs down the stretch. I mean, after this, A&M comes to town, and they go at Georgia, ULM, and then at Mississippi State. This has, if you know what I mean here, to get my drift, this has 11 a.m. Jefferson Pilot Lincoln Financial written all over it if we were back in the early 2000s, mid-2000s. This is a game, 11 a.m. SEC Network, maybe 2:30 SEC Network. No one's really watching that. Ole Miss sleepwalks through because they went to Auburn the week before, and then Texas A&M's coming into town the next week. They're not looking at Vandy, but Vandy, if they're sitting there 4-2, 6-1, like I think they could be. I mean, just look at, pulling up the schedule here, Vandy, Hawaii week 0, Alabama A&M, Wake Forest, UNLV, Kentucky, Missouri, and Florida, and then Georgia in a bye week. Vandy's got a bye week before this Ole Miss game. This is the definition of a sleeper game for Ole Miss. So I really expect Vanderbilt to be 4-2. I think Vanderbilt with a shot of being 5-1. The big key for them will be that Wake Forest game. But my point being, if all that is coming true, if all that is real, Vanderbilt's going to want to win this game. They're going to see a real potential. They want to get this third. This is Clark Lee's third year. They want to get that 6th win this year. I think they're improving. I'm not ready to say they'll get there yet. It's a big trap game for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, just where it sets up on the schedule. Mississippi State. Kentucky at home on November 4th, I think. This is week 10, deep into the grind of the season. Where's this team at with a new head coach at this point, Zach Arnett? For Kentucky, this could be the difference between 8 or 9 wins for them this year. They'll be fired up coming in. A little bit later, it'll be a little cold. It doesn't really bother Kentucky much, but a very interesting game. Other than that, I didn't see a lot of trap games from Mississippi State. Maybe it's South Carolina, but first SEC road game, they'll be fired up for that. I just thought this was one. Didn't really see a lot, if I'm being honest, on that schedule that were just glaring because I think they're kind of the sleeper team this year, Mississippi State. But again, if I had to pick one, I think it's later the season, kind of towards the end of the grind for Mississippi State here. After games in Fayetteville and Auburn, they come back and they finish up with Texas A&M and College Station, Southern Miss, and Ole Miss at home. I just think Kentucky fits in here, and it's not a bad schedule for Mississippi State. Honestly, I don't really see a lot. I think they'll be focused every one of them for most of them here. But if there was one, I would have to say the Kentucky one. I don't overly feel that strongly about this one, but anyone on the schedule here, I would have picked the Kentucky game. Texas A&M. I think it's the Arkansas game in Arlington. I think it's the Arkansas game in Arlington, the Southwest Classic, September 30th, week 5. Do the Aggies take this game for granted? I mean, if you really ask them, they're going to tell you no. But the staff, the players, they've won this game a lot. Only lost it, once ever since joining the SEC, and that was 2 years ago. They've had so much success in it. I just don't know if they really the Southwest Classic trophy set in the College State, the A&M football facility for so long now. It's human nature. I think they may take it for granted. And I think Arkansas is ready to take this game that much more serious. Arkansas probably should have won the game last year. It's just a fact right now. This game, I think A&M doesn't take it serious, but this is the year it could bite them in the tail. Because after this, they go back to back. I mean, this could be a game they totally overlooking because they get Alabama at home the next week. Remember, this is sandwiched between they get Auburn, then Arkansas and Arlington, Alabama and Tennessee. I know it's easy to say, hey, like it's just next opponent, but this is a team Texas A&M's owned. And they're looking at Alabama, who a team they easily could have beat last year in Tuscaloosa, coming to their place the next week. And then kind of the sexy team in the SEC right now, Tennessee, the next week to go make a statement is what A&M are. You think they're going to be thinking about Arkansas? Not saying not everybody's going to be focused on Arkansas, but the whole team or the staff, it's just human nature. This has let down, sleeper written all over it. Maybe Arkansas gets the job done this year. This is a game Texas A&M needs to take serious, especially with Alabama and Tennessee on the dive. They want to contend for the West. They can't drop this game. But it's a game that fits the definition of a sleeper game. That's it for the West. Heading to the SEC East for Florida. I think it's at Missouri, November 18th, week 12, very late in the year. It could be really cold in Columbia, Missouri at that point. You hear me say that because I'm basing all this off scheduling timing. Where will Florida be at from a middle standpoint? This is very late in the year. Like I said, week 12. Could they be looking ahead for a little bit of revenge because Florida State's coming to town the next week? It's the second to last weekend of your last conference game. Florida lost last time they were Dan Mullen. But could Florida be looking ahead? This will all be where are they at mentally from this standpoint? How's the season going? This has it written all over because from my history, guys from Florida don't like going to play in the cold. They don't. So this will be an interesting one. Georgia. Tough to find one, too, because I'm adamantly about it's a one-game schedule. They go into Knoxville. So I'm going to go with the game right before the game in Knoxville. Ole Miss at home on November 11th, Week 12. Like I said, a week before the trip to Knoxville for the big game in the SECs. And Lane Kiffin coaches like a Cavalier. Nothing would please this guy more if he could go knock off his former coworker and kind of get them a little bit shaken out of the playoff race potentially. Nothing would jack him up. If this game's close in the fourth quarter, he's going to play with nothing to lose. I'm just telling you. He isn't. Now, this will also depend where Ole Miss is from an injury standpoint. How's the season going? Again, it's late. It's Week 12. But this is the only sleeper game I could see on Georgia's schedule. Maybe potentially at Auburn early in the year. But that's the first SEC road game. And under Kirby, really, Georgia's played a lot better on the road with a little bit more mentality like Alabama used to have. They rolled in like with the boys. They like being it's us against the world mentality more so than they get a little bit comfortable at home. It's not every game, every season, but the road games for Georgia don't really bother me like that. That it's on the road, man. It's a tough game. Georgia's under Kirby Smart's done a really good job on the road. So I went with Ole Miss. Again, though, it's going to depend where Ole Miss is. I'm not calling this a loss, but if there was a potential loss on the schedule where it's at before the big SEC showdown in Knoxville the week before, this game against a Cavalier type coach who could put up some points on you. And I'm sorry to tell you, Georgia fans, Georgia's not going to be as good on defense as they were last year, or the last 2 years. It's not possible. It doesn't mean they're going to be bad. There's just going to be a little bit of a drop-off, just like I tell the Tennessee fans. Doesn't mean Tennessee's offense is going to be bad. There's going to be a little bit of a drop-off from Hendon Hooker. I don't think they fully understand or appreciate what the guy fully did last year. So just using some examples there. But Georgia, sleeper game of the year, potentially Ole Miss, coming to Athens, between the hedges. Kentucky. The Kentucky Wildcats here. Biggest trap game. At Vanderbilt. At Vanderbilt, September 23rd, Week 4. They're probably going to come in feeling good about themselves. They see Florida. The Gators coming in for a big SEC showdown the next week, coming to Kroger Field in Lexington. Vandy should still roll in with a lot to play for. They could come in with one loss to Wake Forest. It's the first SEC game. They're going to be fired up trying to get to that 6th win in their 3rd season. I think Vanderbilt at least should be 4-1. This could be a really interesting game for Kentucky. Mature game, maturity game. A mature team wins this game. This screams a game Kentucky needs to be real careful of. Going over to Columbia, Missouri. It's a little out-of-conference game they need to be worried about here. Middle Tennessee State at home. Middle Tennessee State at home. Call me crazy, but we've seen the Blue Raiders pull off some upsets before. Not that Miami was any good last year, but Miami went. But Middle Tennessee State, Rick Stockstill and the boys went down there and got the W. They're not against going to beat. And I'm telling you, there's not much difference on paper between Missouri and Miami. So the thing to keep in mind here, Missouri's going to have a real idea of how good Middle is. The first week of the year, they go to Tuscaloosa, Middle Tennessee State, and then they go to Columbia, Missouri. Who scheduled that for Middle? I don't know, but they're taking on anyone, anywhere, anytime type mentality. But if Missouri's looking ahead to that revenge game, remember, Kansas State comes to Columbia the very next week. Missouri's going to be pissed off. They got embarrassed last year in that little rain delay deal in Manhattan, Kansas last year. Kansas State put it on them. Kansas State returns a lot. I'm not saying they're going to lose this game, but if I was going to pick an early season upset for a team in the SEC, Missouri fans are going to hate me. It would not shock me if it was this one. The only thing I could be a little bit worried about here if you're Middle is they may get beat up by Alabama the week before. But again, it's a game Alabama shouldn't take for granted against Middle Tennessee State. They're a solid program, and they've racked up their wins. They've got their fair share of non-conference wins against big conferences before. But this is one where it's sandwiched early in the year. Missouri's going to be feeling good about themselves besides the quarterback situation. Kansas State comes in for the big non-con game. They're trying to get revenge from getting embarrassed. They better worry about the Blue Raiders. Just telling you. Preston Skinner, thank you for listening, brother. Appreciate it. You said tell them Shooms. I appreciate you listening, man. Moving to South Carolina. Now, this is one when I was prepping for this, I couldn't really pick. So I'm looking at the schedule right now for the Gamecocks. It was kind of like Mississippi State. I didn't really see a true, like a game they need to be careful on that could be a kind of a snooze fest sleeper game, big trap game for South Carolina. In the moment, I'm going to go with it. I'm going to go Vanderbilt at home. Vanderbilt and Columbia. Not saying they're going to win it, but again, I mean, they have their bye week in the middle of the schedule, but they end the year going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight games between Florida at home, going to Columbia, Missouri, Texas A&M, Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt at home, which I said that's the trap game, Kentucky at home, and Clemson at home to wrap it up. I think it's going to be the Vanderbilt game, just kind of sandwiched between the end of the year, Kentucky and Clemson. Some may say Missouri, but again, I know Shane Beamer, Elijah Drinkwitz kind of had their little rivalry right now. Beamer's never beat Missouri. I don't think they're going to be overlooking Missouri. That's a game I think they have circled, as crazy as it sounds. I think that's a game they have circled because Beamer's never won that. Drinkwitz kind of pokes the bear a little bit. So not that one. And that's what made me be like, man, it's a Mississippi State and Columbia, but that's week 4. It's your first SEC home game. You need to be fired up for that. They're not going to be overlooking that. So I'm going to go with Vanderbilt at home for South Carolina. For Tennessee, we go at Kentucky, October 28th, week 9. Tennessee coming off back-to-back big games against Texas A&M and Alabama. Kentucky coming off a bye week. Again, it all depends where it sets up for your schedule. And that team you're playing, what are they coming off of? They're coming off a bye week. Kentucky's also just due to get a win here against Tennessee. It never happens. It's at the Krog this year, Kroger Field, if you're not familiar. It's Kentucky's home stadium. But the key is going to be, what's Tennessee's mindset coming in? Are they going to be coming off 2 straight conference losses? Are they going to be coming in 1-1? They'll be 2-0. They still got Georgia late in the schedule. I think this is Tennessee's trap game for sure right here. Right here, after looking at it, I feel very strongly about this one. And then finally, Vanderbilt, just going through it. At UNLV, September 16th, week 4 for Vanderbilt. They start week 0, so it's week 4 for Vanderbilt. The Hawaii comes to Nashville. They start a week before Vanderbilt than everybody else. Game is sandwiched between their big non-conference game at Wake Forest and their first SEC game against Kentucky. But let's be honest, Vanderbilt doesn't really have a lot of sleeper opportunities. They're usually the hunter. They're usually trying to go surprise somebody. So I'm not really going to put any conference game because Vanderbilt's the one trying to sneak up on people. Like I said, I think the sleeper game for Ole Miss is Vanderbilt coming to Oxford. But they're usually on the hunt. This was a game that stuck out to me. A game Vanderbilt should win against a first-year program. Barry Odom, remember the Arkansas DC, former Missouri coach, is now the head coach for the Running Rebels and UNLV. There are a lot of distractions in this game, like with the conference opener against Kentucky the next week, and then, like I said, the week before, the big one against Wake Forest. And throw in the fact they're in Las Vegas, Nevada, baby. There could be a lot of distractions there. But again, this is a game Vanderbilt should win, but if I was going to find a game, a little sleeper game for Vanderbilt, it's UNLV. But that wraps up the big sleep games, the trap games in the SEC this year for the SEC West and SEC. It's just throwing them out there. Again, not telling your team's going to lose, just some games your team may need to keep an eye out because where it fits on the schedule and that opponent coming in, what have they been doing? Are they coming off a bye week? Are they coming off an hellacious schedule? So again, when I'm making schedule predictions, I'm not just going who's the better team on paper. Where's it set up on schedules? I like listening to people that talk about that because you're giving it context and it's not just surface level stuff. So I hope this is a segment you enjoyed. But again, it's time for a little scout school, getting Josh Murphy recruiting 101 in. Let me get him in for just a minute, and we'll get to those about. Oh, here he is right here, baby. Joshua.
What is up, man? How are you?
Hold on, baby.
Hey, it is hot down here in Savannah too, for the record.
Oh man, it's hellacious right now. I was looking at the weather right before, and I was like, dude, I mean, Atlanta may be the coolest place I've seen. 90 degrees over there.
It's nice. I don't even know what it is here. I know it's hot when I walk outside. Hey, I'll tell you what, we're going to Arkansas in a couple of days, and it was 96 there today when we looked. So pushing a hundo in Arkansas.
It's that time of year. Remember the camp seasons? You go lose weight. You go lose 10 pounds a day working those 7-on-7 camps.
Oh yeah. I counted it into my my workout regimen was the summer camp weight loss just by being out there. So part of the yearly weight loss kind of factor there.
Well, Murph, I appreciate it, guys. Remember, we're starting the Scout School segment every Thursday through the summer. This is Josh Murphy. Remember, if you missed last week's episode, Josh used to be a director, worked at both the University of Georgia, University of Washington, seen from different angles, like his Chris Peterson, how they had a structure process of their evaluation skills. Then Georgia, worked with Kirby Smart and Mark Richt. He has a lot of knowledge, a lot of background. Josh, you want to tell everybody a little bit what you're doing now before we get in it to the people who missed last week's episode, just so they get refreshed, and then I'll introduce kind of what we're doing as well.
For sure. Hey, real quick, speaking of hot, if I had to ask you, what would be your hottest take right now in the SEC total? Hottest take total?
Hottest take total.
Like for football. Like if you had to head into the season, East and West, what's your hottest take?
That I really believe or I think could happen. Like that's like that you're like, oh no, you think's going to happen.
That you think is going to happen. Like if like it's maybe nobody else is calling it, but a hot take that you think come January.
I think LSU. I mean, this isn't some crazy, but I think LSU is going to lose to either at Mississippi State or at Ole Miss this year. They're going to lose to one of the Mississippi schools. I think Texas A&M is being a little counted out a little too. Would not. I mean, I think you could make an argument they're the third or fourth most talented team in the league, and probably either the first. I think they're not far off from paper from Alabama and LSU on paper. I don't think they are. It doesn't mean you don't have the internal issues with that. As we know, the Bobby Petrino. We got a bunch of former head coaches on that offensive staff with Steve Adazio, Bobby Petrino. You got Jimbo being the head coach. But on paper, from talking to those guys in that building, granted, everyone feels good right now because everybody's undefeated, but they do feel really good, and obviously the recruiting rankings back that up. But it would not shock me if Texas A&M won the West. I think this is the most open the SEC West has been in since 2014.
Have you already declared like your projected winners? Have you done that yet?
No, I know. I'll probably wait a little bit.
Will you do that in August or when will you do that?
In August.
Yeah, August. So,
no. But I think this is the most open it's been. Last year, Alabama was like the overwhelmingly favorite, even though they didn't win it. But I think this is the most open it's been going into the season. It'll be interesting to see what the media picks in the media days in like 3 or 4 weeks. I think Georgia this isn't some bold take. I don't think Georgia loses a regular season game. I think they'll go 12-0. I think their only shot to lose is really at Tennessee. I was talking about kind of their sleeper game, Ole Miss at home the week before, but I really don't think Ole Miss will straight up win that game.
So we got Tennessee as the number 2 in South Carolina with Rattlers. Are these kind of the dark horse? Is that how people see it?
Yeah. I would say Tennessee right now at 2. And then I like Kentucky. Kentucky can get the offensive line fixed. I think they'll be pretty good. I kind of like the Devin.
That was another question I had. Speaking of hot, from like a hot seat standpoint, how do the Kentucky fans, do they like, are we cool with Bob Stoops still? Are we happy with Bob Stoops? Or are we kind of like, or sorry, Mark Stoops, yeah.
I think they're fine with Mark Stoops. Hell, I think there's more pressure on Cal than there is Mark Stoops right now.
What's happened with that? Because I heard you talking about that last
week. So he's been at Cal. He's been against the whole collective, but I think he wants more control. Or he made his own collective that only the boosters that are like in his corner can donate to. So I think he didn't want the collective because he's worried the big guys that don't really like him will want their money.
He's worried about losing control. Is that what it is?
Yeah. So he only let the guys in the collective that are his guys. So, and it's called the La Familia Collective.
Is that a Drake thing? La Familia?
I don't know. I didn't know that too. But from what I gathered, it sounds like he's finally open to it because they were losing so many dudes out on it.
What's happened? Like, is that really just what's happened? Like, it feels like Kentucky went from being literally in every single conversation, literally every single year a threat to win, and then now the last couple of years, them and UNC, like some of those bigger schools are kind of like not quite as. Is that the portal? Is that NIL?
I think some of that's NIL. Just some of these teams aren't very open with that, but I do know Cal was not. They had the Hunter Dickinson kid between Kansas and Kentucky, the kid that transferred from Michigan, and I think Cal's just like Kentucky. If you come here, it's almost a privilege to play for Kentucky, and like this brand platform of Kentucky can take you a lot of places. Why should we give you money up front? And you respect that. He's right, but also it's just not really the game. Like, you know what I mean? Right. So now I think he was kind of, all right, well, if I'm going to play in this collective, it's going to be under my rules. Right. So I think that's kind of where they're at from basketball standpoint.
And is he budging? He's not budging?
No, but I think he budged a little bit for his own collective. It's more than he was doing. So it should be interesting to see what they do next transfer portal cycle. Because they lost that Arthur Kaluma kid, Creighton's big man. Kentucky shouldn't be losing kids to Kansas State if they really want them.
Right, and that's the reality now, huh?
Yeah, you can lose Hunter Dickinson to Kansas, and it's Kansas, but not to Kansas State.
Kansas State is biggest, and I'm out of the loop. Admittedly, the biggest Kansas State recruit I remember is Michael Beasley.
Michael Beasley.
Yeah, he's great. All right. Well, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Nice little. I had some questions written down. Anyway, to get back to your original question, basically what I do with Recruiting 101 is help kids and their families in high schools understand what we look for in the recruiting process. So what goes into identifying, evaluating prospects, and then what you can do as a player to put yourself in the best position to be seen, to be found, to be evaluated, and what you can do to make sure that you got all your ducks in a row, and that you're doing everything you can to put yourself in the best place to be seen as a prospect. So that's pretty much it.
Well, Murph, let's get to it, baby. It's Thursday. So I haven't told the audience yet who we're watching. First guy we're going to get to here before we go to the film, Jalen Hurts. If you haven't been living under a rock, you know who Jalen Hurts is. Quarterback from the 2016 class, Channelview High School in Texas. Originally, as we know, went to Alabama, transferred to Oklahoma, got drafted in the second round by the Philadelphia Eagles. Interesting storyline. Anybody ever? Only time I ever met Jalen. Well, I saw Jalen Hurts play every year of his college career, randomly enough. 2016 when I was at Auburn, in person. We saw him there. 17 when I was at A&M. 18 when he was the backup at Alabama. And then at Kansas, we played him his year at Oklahoma. So I remember at Auburn, he came for a visit. Dude, you always remember that kid was just a very mature kid. I feel like anybody who ever dealt with the kid felt the same way. Like I remember just going back reading some updated stuff on him. Like Mike Locksley talking about he got there in the spring with him, and everybody doesn't know Mike Locksley, Maryland's coach, used to be the analyst at Alabama, former OC. Was saying he was walking off the field, Jalen Hurts' first spring, and they were both new. Jalen just got there, Mike just got there. And Jalen Hurts told him, he's like, I'm going to make those other three guys transfer. And it was the other three guys, again, Blake Barnett, Cooper Bateman, and David Cornwell, and all three of those guys did. It was almost, just anybody talked to you, like the guy was always, he was very aware of his deficiencies, and they're like, dude, he was almost annoying to the staff a little bit.
That's such a big thing, because if there's so many players that are resistant, or just people in general, right? People who are resistant to their deficiencies or maybe things that they could improve. And as a player, right, if you're aware of maybe how you're going to be attacked or how you're seen from the other side of the field or whatever, to know kind of how you're seen is to know what you can improve upon, and that is something that, like what you're saying with Jalen Hurts, is so unique, because he seemed to embrace that so well, right? Like in the sense that he's kind of known, like, all right, I'm seen as this, and then the next year is kind of a little bit better, and then the next year, all right, well, y'all still see me as that, and the next year is a little bit better. And I think to see him, bounce around like he has, and to see, to go on to be and I was going to ask, like, with his, pick in the second round, did that surprise you at the time at all? Like, were you surprised by that pick? Do you think it was a reach or not?
By Alabama?
No, by the Eagles.
By the Eagles? They got a lot of I feel like, they got a lot of critique about it, because who was there? Carson Wentz at the time?
Yeah.
He said, the thing is, I feel like Jalen Hurts was, you read about it and you hear everybody talk about it from his high school film, you see it too, just he checked every freaking box. His dad was a coach, played for his dad all 4 years, didn't have a 7-on-7 coach, didn't ever train with that, didn't ever do that. Kid was ran track, did powerlifting, always wanted more. So it's like, if you trusted your quarterback, he's never going to be an off the field issue. He never left the facility at Alabama. I don't really think he leaves the facility in Philly when it's football season. It's like, well, shoot, dude, if I can just develop this guy really in the intermediate passing game, we should be good. He struggled at first, but look at the guy now. Murph, your opinion, are you a coach? Are you taking the risk on a guy that you're like, hey man, I might get to worry about? It's not going to be due to lack of hard work because of him. It's not going to be because of maturity. The most mature kid probably in the NFL. It's really just like, hey, can I hone this guy's really intermediate skills? Because the guy, he's a lot bulkier and has a lower body strength than people remember. Dude, I read an article, you were talking about who we were going to do. It was saying Jalen Hurts, that played a team in the Channelview's division. They're like, dude, it was really just how strong he was in the lower body. The initial tackler would never get him down. I know we're talking high school, but still, you saw some of that in college. Just the initial shake, someone would maybe just some would-be tackler would just fall right off Jalen Hurts. I mean, and I think that freshman year with Jalen Hurts was a total perfect. That defense was so good, led by a bunch of seniors, and I think it was, hey, Jalen, just don't turn the ball over, man. And he played within that, but from everybody you hear, it worked in the building. Then, like, he was very aware. Then you bring in Tua, and I think he knew Tua was good, and I think he knew he had to try to outwork Tua. But I mean, again, everything happens for a reason. Look at him now. But man, I mean, what do you think? You think the Eagles stretched on him?
Who? Well, no, certainly not now. I mean, at the time, no. I mean, even at the time, it was kind of hard to. Well, like the thing is, it's one of those deals where it's like if you're aware of the team, and this is we could have a whole different conversation on this. But if like you're aware of the team and the identity of the team and the philosophy of the team, then you kind of know, what their kind of outlook is when it comes to roster, construction or management or whatever. And like the Eagles, for instance, have like long been a proponent of backup quarterbacks being one of the more important kind of elements of the team, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that comes through. I think even like the McNabb years, they had a dude that was kind of there. Kevin Cobb towards the later end was the backup. The year they went to the Super Bowl, obviously it was Nick Foles that got him there most of the way when Wentz got hurt. And then obviously when Wentz, at that point in his career, they were obviously around him, every day for a couple of years on end. They drafted, Hurts in the second round. But one, it was within line with what they were doing already, but what their philosophy was. But given what he did at Oklahoma and Bama and everything, I don't think it was a reach at all. It was just it's interesting to see because and if any team, it's one of those teams that when they get him, you feel pretty good about he's in good hands. In Philly with what they've done historically and how they the style of offense they have played in the last couple of years.
Hey, everybody joining in, Josh making a good point, but Jalen Hurts, this is the film. This is his senior highlights. Out of high school, he was listed 6'2", 208. At the combine. Murph, you want the combine numbers right now? You want to wait?
6'2". Let's just watch him as a high schooler right now. Let me see
6'2".
him.
This is him again listed on 247, the recruiting service. So give or take 6'2", 208.
Texas ball. So still, ooh, all right. He's playing in a Stephen King novel. All right.
Now I remember he was very close. A&M was up there too with someone.
I was going to ask.
Who did it come down to? You know who they just took? You know who they took that year? It was Kyler Murray, and they still had Kyler Murray and the kid that transferred to SMU on their roster, Kyle Allen. Remember both them?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you remember Kyler Murray, but
the two Kyles. Yeah, and I remember. Who did it come down to for Hurts?
If I remember right, Jalen was committed to them for a long time. I think A&M was kind of the last team to try to flip him, but it I think Bama was on him early, and it kind of sucked. Those are the only two teams I remember off the top of my head in that deal.
So even so, like that, like as it gets to, and like a lot of people don't necessarily equate, high school, football recruiting and NFL scouting, but like there are more similarities than maybe people would realize. Like even the fact that Hurts basically went into the belly of the beast in Bama and embraced what that is, as a quarterback and in that position. Like he went into it fully knowing what he was getting into and basically has embraced all the adversity at every stop, the whole time, his whole career, So I think even more so the fact that he committed to Bama early.
He committed, Murph, I'm looking at it right now, June 5th, 2015. He was in the 16 class. So he committed the summer of his senior year.
Summer of his senior year. How many offers?
Going into his senior year.
How many?
So right after junior year. You always forget he was an Elite 11 finalist. I feel like sometimes that's very I forget about that. That's the thing with Jay. I feel like Jalen always did a really good job avoiding stuff in the practice. It wasn't like overly athletic, and he's very athletic. It's not, but it's not like, oh shit. It's just it's a feel. I'd always be interested to ask somebody who actually is a quarterback coach, how much can you improve just like like between the tackles, pocket presence, pocket awareness. Like, how much can that be improved? I think a lot of that's just a little natural, honestly. What about you?
Well, it's funny is like how much obviously, they're individual case studies, so you don't want to get too wrapped up in the singular cases. But like the whole Josh Allen thing, if you look at his career, percentage passing, accuracy, whatever it is, and how that improved, so much in the last couple of years in Buffalo, and what that looked like really when Brian Daboll was there and everything. It kind of like it was one of those things where it's a case study and like, hey, he went from being like if we look back at Wyoming, like 56% passer, 55% passer, to being like a 66, 67, 68, something pretty good like that. And like some of that, you could argue that could be the play calling, right? Like, what does Dable, call him? What is he putting him in a position to do? What does he ask him to do? How is he coaching? Like all of that can be.
Hey, it's funny too, Murph. Daboll coached both those guys, Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts.
Hey, there you go. Hey, and as soon as it's funny too. As soon as he left, Allen had kind of regressed, I guess is how it'd be seen. As soon as he left, and Daniel Jones, another kind of SEC tie-in kind of with Colquitt, he had his kind of a career year that led to an extension with the Giants with Daboll. So yeah, could be the coach.
And I'll say this with Jalen. He is one of the few players that I think has improved every year he's played football after high school. Now, I wouldn't say the only, but like, think about it. Improved 16, I know he started. 17, I think he improved a little. 18, I think when Dan Enos got there, he improved. He just didn't start. Tua started, so he didn't get as many reps. Then at Oklahoma, I mean, the guy took his team to the playoffs. I thought he was improving. He's literally improved every year going through the NFL.
And we need to look at that too. Like, I think so much too, and this is the issue that I have sometimes with like sport radio or talk radio. Sometimes when the context gets lost. Like he didn't start immediately, right? But he didn't start to a top 6 NFL draft pick. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like so often, how often does that happen? Like how often is the guy that's not starting because he's losing out to a guy that's also elite at his position? Like that's such a rare occurrence just to have a room that's so loaded. It's like, all right, well, he would have started at 99% of other places, and he was just willing to go, in that place in the first place and have that battle. And even if he didn't win, that particular, outright, the fact that he was even there in the first place kind of, ended up being, why he's successful in doing what he's doing in the NFL as well,
And there was always a big rumor, like when I think, remember, there wasn't the one-time transfer at the time. So right. I remember he was one of the few grad transfers, and everybody was fine with it. I think everybody's fine with that. You get a degree, you transfer, you want to go play your last year somewhere. I think everybody's fine with that. The funny story about him, and I totally forgot about this, and I should have brought this up when me and you were prepping for this. Dude, I heard this from the horse's mouth. The head coach at Auburn at that time was telling me this. When I worked with him at UCF, he was close to going to Auburn. Like Gus met them down there, him and his dad in Birmingham. He wanted to get Auburn, but you know why he didn't? The guy was so worried that his career at Alabama would be so tarnished if he left Alabama to go play at Auburn that I think he was just like, and Nick Saban told him to go transfer to Oklahoma, and Mike Locksley was pissed because I think the final 3 schools, or the 2 publicly known schools, were Maryland with Locksley and then Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. And I think Auburn was kind of getting in there, but they met, and I think he was just like, I'll never be able to go back to Tuscaloosa if I transfer to Auburn, and I like
right.
And then Saban told Jalen Hurts, you won't get developed by Mike Locksley, so you need to go play under Lincoln Riley. And Locksley took offense to that. That was kind of his transfer story there. But, I mean, it was a good decision for him, to go to Oklahoma. He got that. I mean, it's the perfect timing. Like, he's really walked right into that starting position. But, dude, remember, it just shows you how big of a grinder this kid was, dude. He'd go play games in Oklahoma and then go to the weight room right after.
Let's look at his film. So, all right. So, he was a 4-star, right? Not a 5-star, right?
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, correct.
Is it is he kind like, let's try to like make sense of why he was a 4-star. Just watching his tape. Is it because he's kind of like good at everything, not quote unquote great at anything? Is that kind of where his knock is? Like trying to make sense
Yeah,
of
kind of like the
like try
classic
to make
line.
sense how a
He's
guy
talented at many things, but a master at nothing.
like he's not 6'5", he's probably 6'1" and a half, right?
Yep.
He's not running a 4.3. He's probably running what a 4.5, 4.45. I don't know.
Yep.
Like he doesn't have he has a really
Murph, let's look at the hold on while we pull this. Oh, let me put it up on my phone. Let's just for conversation. Let's look at who are the other quarterbacks in that class. We're not going to go down big a rabbit hole there. I'm just interested to see who the. You're right though. It'd be interesting to see what Alabama.
What is the threshold? It's always interesting in the hindsight, right? To look back and like, all right, well, the people who are looking at this and ranking this, what were they seeing? Because it's all about like it's all relative, right? So the field is what matters, and a lot of times like these rankings come down to height, weight, speed. But this is a guy who what six on paper, right? 6'2", 210, Texas.
Checked every box from a
dual threat, yeah.
All right, you ready? Bert, tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready. Hit me with it, baby.
All right. Remember 247 splits them up. Dual threat. He's in the dual threat quarterback categories. You could probably guess. Number one,
horror movie.
Tennessee fans, get ready to cringe. Jarrett Guarantano.
Number two, where was he from?
Virgin Catholic. He was like the Pruitt era quarterback for Tennessee.
This is a Catholic. Is that New Jersey or is that Ohio?
Yeah, New Jersey. Then number two, I remember this kid, Brandon McElwain, went to South Carolina from Council Rock North. He never did anything.
Yeah.
Then you had Jalen Hurts sitting at 3. Then you had Shane Bichelle 4, Jawan Pass 5. I mean, this was a very poor dual threat quarterback class. Just to name a couple more for you. Woody Barrett 6, Zarek Cooper 7, Terry Wilson 8. Dude, I mean, Skylar Thompson, who started, it seemed like 2 decades at Kansas State, was 10th, and he's probably in the top 3 successful guys. I mean, hands down, Jalen Hurts the most successful quarterback. It's not even close.
Can you pull up the non-dual threat?
The pro. All right, the pro. Shea Patterson, Jacob Eason.
Shea Patterson was not. He wasn't considered a dual threat.
I literally thought the same thing when I just read this. But under pro, it is Shea Patterson, Jacob Eason, KJ Costello, Malik Henry, Felipe Franks, Brandon Peters, Dwayne Haskins, Jack Allison, Austin Kendall, Patrick O'Brien.
Okay, hold up. Let me stop you there.
Yep.
Can you say the top 5 to 10 again?
Sorry. Shea Patterson went to Ole Miss for everybody listening out there. Jacob Eason went to Georgia, transferred to Washington. KJ Costello went to Stanford, transferred to Mississippi State. Malik Henry, I believe, stayed at Florida State. Maybe he didn't. Felipe Franks, everybody remembers him, started at Florida and then transferred to Arkansas. Dwayne Haskins, a first-round draft pick. And that's really the only other ones that Jake Bentley was sitting at 12.
Hey, so what's funny is I think like it's interesting in hindsight because it's fun. You wonder back like when you look at the draft and you look at high school football rankings or whatever, you wonder like how did people miss on a future NFL quarterback or a future Hall of Famer or blah blah blah, right? Like how do people miss? So I think one, it's harder than people realize, but two, looking at context is a way to kind of go back in time and to look at and see maybe how people missed a little bit and just kind of you naming the list of pro style quarterbacks off the top of off the list, like a bunch of giants, right? So a bunch of guys with big cannons, right? Felipe Franks, giant with a cannon. Jacob Eason, giant with a cannon. Shea Patterson, IMG, dual threat guy coming out. I think he was probably comparable size to Hurts, give or take, right?
Yeah.
But coming from IMG.
247 listed him at. Sorry. 6'1.5", 192. Yeah. Hurts, I think, he was listening. Jalen's a thick guy.
Right. But it is interesting. Like, I think that's a little bit of how, like, that was a year in hindsight, the dual threat quarterbacks were didn't pan out, so to speak, outside of Hurts. But the pro style guys were really good, like a really solid class with Eason, Felipe Franks, Malik Henry, even saw immediate time. I think something happened.
Well, there's even some stats. Murph, there's even some stats for context right there. If you just wanted to see what he's senior, stats.
So Hurts was doing he was doing the same thing he's doing with the Eagles now back in high school, huh? So basically,
yeah, it was just the inconsistency of it. It's amazing when you really talk about the kid, like raw from just a motion standpoint. But the guy just always kind of had a feel for the game. I don't know if that goes back to just being around the game his entire life. His dad always being the high school coach, but he did just improve. Obviously, it was while we were on the show, I was thinking about it. It's like he really did improve every year that I watched it. I mean, from seeing him
is this
16,
his junior 17, year right here?
This is his senior year.
Well, what did we just watch? Or is it the same tape?
This is the same tape. I just put it back on while we were talking about him.
Yeah, but like again, dude, in hindsight, you wonder, you go back, like, and definitely steer me in the right direction here. Kyler Murray was the quarterback who was like the high school legend, right? The 48-0 or blah 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 Allen, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But remember, he was debating whether he's going to go play baseball.
Sure. So, but Hurts is, I mean, this is still Texas ball, which historically, then, now, forever, whatever. Like,
and don't hold. I think at the time his team wasn't overly great. I think it was kind of like they made the playoffs and stuff, but it wasn't some like dominant state championship run.
But still hit. Okay, sure. But still, him being average in Texas is still better than 95% of most, high school football, right? Like whoever they're playing, like in the relative, scheme of things, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Texas, California, those kind of stand out in the high school. Ohio maybe. There's some other school, other states that are certainly in the mix, but he's in the top 5 place to play high school football. He's as dual threat as they come. 2,500 yards passing, 20. A 5-to-1 ratio or whatever of picks to touchdowns. Another 25 rushing with 1,500 yards. So it's just interesting, that he's not the bona fide 5-star number 1 player. And, in hindsight, I think it's when you look at this tape, I think it's just, against the field, you have an Eason who is big, fairly mobile for his size, right? Cannon, and that's a whole different story within itself. We can go into Jacob Eason because that's part of, both of our careers, a little bit of, mine with a little bit more, but Eason, big arm, Felipe Franks, big arm, Shea Patterson, his whole thing at IMG. So, it kind of makes sense. And somebody else, I think Costello was a little bit bigger of a guy too, wasn't he?
Yeah. And he definitely, he was. And the thing with Hurts, I mean, if you're right, I feel like he was used a little bit as like just a running back of his first year or two. Like he was more like, yeah, Jalen, we'll get you out in space if you just can make the necessary throws, don't turn it over, we'll be okay. And I just feel like he just kept taking the next step each year. Honestly, the biggest gaps were from 17, 18, 18, 19, and forward. I mean,
do you feel like offensive coordinators and coaches in the last 10 years or so have done a better job of adapting to the players and not making them, like holistically, not like selectively, holistically adapted better to the players to put them in a better position to let them just play their own game as opposed to forcing them to fit into how they want them to play,
I would say case by case basis. I think some coaches,
but like university as a whole, the whole sport, I feel like has done a better job of acquiescing a little bit and allowing, not like, and I don't want to get into, like Justin Fields and Jim Chaney at Georgia type conversation. Like in hindsight, if we're being honest, it's like an awkward fit, right? It's an awkward fit given the history and who he's coached and what he's done and the offenses he's run and what best suits that player, right? Like even today we look at Fields, he's a 1,000-yard rusher in the NFL, right? Doing things in the NFL at elite athleticism. Maybe the passing is still kind of a work in progress, but to say, he was a gimmick player only at Georgia in college is kind of crazy in hindsight, right? Like it's kind of wild to be like, what did he really do on that Georgia team? Really not a lot, right? But in the NFL, he's out there running around, being disruptive and teams are building around him, right? So it's just kind of interesting. I think for years, like, the Jim Chaneys of the world, or, and I'm not even, of other coaches, right? I think it's just interesting. I think we're seeing coaches doing a better job of adapting to the talent around them. And maybe guys are doing a better job of kind of knowing, who the coaches are or whatever. But I do think it's such an important component of this whole deal because, he goes to a different scheme and almost overnight, he's a star, and it's just kind of like, it's the same clay that we're working with here, so.
You're talking about from a little bit, just a combination when Jalen went to Oklahoma and kind of when Justin Fields went to a totally different system.
Well, yeah. And I think, I think with, Hurts, it's a little different because you saw enough like Fields. I don't think you really saw much of him really playing quarterback at Georgia. Like, I don't think you really saw a ton. Hurts, you saw him play quarterback. Like he was back there. He was 12-0, blah, blah, blah. Like he started.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Justin Fields is known at Georgia really for the fake punt against Alabama in the national championship.
Right. Like he's not, but then the guy goes on to be a top 10 NFL pick. Yeah. So it's like he was there, right? Like the talent's there. And it's just like different. In somebody else's, orchestrated offense, you get to see him really shine. And I think universally, the coaching industry has improved in that regard universally in the last decade, 15 years, where, like what I'm saying is Cam Newton, and this is a whole different conversation, right? Like Cam Newton is arguably one of the most impactful players of our lifetime to come in and completely transform a team. If he goes to a different team, they ask him to play differently. He's maybe not the same player, right? And I think we saw a micro version of that with Justin Fields at Georgia, and then you go see him at Ohio State, you actually see what he's capable of. So it is interesting.
I think teams – I always thought I always like just how the NFL schemed more. They schemed week to week more than just like how are we going to attack their system. Like, when Brady was at the Patriots, that one week they may go throw 40 times. And then the next week, they're just going to go give it to Stephen Ridley about 25, 30 times. There wasn't ever just hey, we're a running team and we're going to just keep running our head into a wall. It was like, hey, this is their weakness. Let's go attack it in the secondary. We're going to throw 40 times this week with Brady. Hey, the run defense next week for the Dolphins may be a little weak. We need to establish the run, keep their offense a little explosive. Let's keep our defense off the field as much as possible. I don't think those conversations, except at a handful of schools, really happen in college. Like I don't think people go in there and scheme to the personnel like of the other team like they do in the NFL. And I think to some extent you have to have like a base of who you are systematically. It can't be like, well, boys, we're going triple option this week. Next week we're going to go 5 wide. We're going to go empty. Like you can't do that. But I think a little bit, like both things can be true at once. You got to have a little system. You got to have a system that you're based upon. But I think you got to tweak it week to week, depending. Like, hey man, this corner gets picked on, dude, and we got a 6'4" receiver out here that could make his money this weekend. We need to attack this guy. Like, I know that's not really what we do a lot, but we need to attack him. That's always frustrated me with college a little bit.
Well, yeah, it is. I think the more progressive OCs again are doing a better job of adopting that and incorporating that. Probably, again, more so, than they were 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. But it's kind of interesting, why it's just I say all that to say when you look at this tape with Jalen Hurts, you're like, this guy's pretty, he's incredible, and he does the same stuff he's doing now in high school in the NFL. It looks the same, right? He's doing the exact same things in the NFL in high school, and you just wonder, how is this guy not the number one overall, recruit in the country, and how come?
I mean, I think some of it had to do with he didn't go to these quarterback train. He went with a quarterback trainer,
and that's part of the, that's what I'm saying too. That's interesting, right? Like, you look back in hindsight, he didn't go all over the the country to all the quarterback training and all that, the 707 showcases and all the.
I mean, the only thing he was at nationally, which is obviously the most important, the Elite 11, he was a participant in, but he wasn't at, like, he didn't have, like, I read an article, he did not have a trainer. Like, him and his dad was his only coach before college.
And I think it's because, again, I think he was good everywhere. I don't think he wasn't 6'5", 6'6". He didn't run a 4.3. Didn't have a laser or a cannon for an arm. He just was really good a lot of places, but wasn't like the thing. So even at Elite 11, what did he place? And I don't want to put you on the spot. Like, I wonder what he placed. He's probably like,
let's see,
third. Like, really, really good. Maybe not the number one, but like just really. And then what puts him over the top, right, is who he is as a person, and that's the thing that nobody can account for. It's just he's relentless.
Let's see.
But it is interesting though, because it's just like, it's in hindsight, you wonder how he's not seen as a bona fide 5-star number one player in the country, because he just does everything you want him to do, right? Like, he can make every throw, he extends the play, he can create his own play, he's accurate, he makes good decisions, so good tape, fun tape.
You good with Jalen?
I'm good. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, he's and now he went from being, and it's just interesting because he went from being benched, and this just speaks to the room at that time with Tua, right? He went from being benched to being, I mean, I don't think it's a question. He's probably the best quarterback in the NFC, right?
Yeah, for sure. I would agree. And then just for his NFL measurables, 6'1", 226, ran a 4.59, 9 3/4 hand at the NFL Combine back in 2020.
So that's what.
All right, Murph. Sticking to offense here. You ready to move to receiver? We haven't done a receiver yet. We're going with Justin Jefferson. For people who don't remember him, the LSU big-time wideout. Believe the 2020 first-round NFL draft, picked in the first round by the Minnesota Vikings. 2017 class, wide receiver 2017 class from Destrehan High School in Louisiana. He's the one that kind of gets thrown around as the lowly 2-3-star. But from getting some backstory of this from people that were in the program at LSU at the time, it was never because of his ability. They said more so his grades weren't in order from the jump. And if you remember, everybody remembers, you keep up for SEC football for a while, Jordan Jefferson, that was his older brother. Guy played quarterback at LSU for 2009 to 2011 under Les Miles there. Jordan Jefferson. So Justin was the better athlete. Again, he went to a 7-on-7 camp at LSU, balled out. They just didn't want to touch him yet because of his grades. Now, randomly enough, you'll go look at his recruiting profile. He had a Northwestern offer, but he had grade issue. Randomly enough. I thought about that when I was looking at it today. I was like, huh.
Any explanation on that? That's interesting.
Nicholls State, Northwestern, LSU. No, I never got the Northwestern one, but from talking to somebody, David Bowen, that was around the program at the time then, it's at Texas A&M now, they were like, it was never we were worried about his like athletic football ability. It was never that. It's like he had to get some grades fixed up before we moved further on in that. But apparently he balled out. He kind of came out. Obviously they knew his former player's little brother playing there, and then also 7-on-7 camp.
Well, that's also something to expand upon that a lot of people don't know is, when there's familiarity, like just to kind of peel the curtain back on the recruiting process, like when there's familiarity within the program, teams, coaching staffs, et cetera, can be a little bit more selective, a little slow play, family members, because it's a little bit more sensitive when they've dealt with family members in the past, when a player's played for that, team, for that program, when he's an alumni, et cetera. So it definitely can play a role in the recruitment if they don't want to, because it's going to be a thing where similar to an in-state, because he's in-state as well, right? For in-state programs, it's kind of a rule when you offer a kid in-state, it's kind of a heightened offer because it may be a little bit more significant from an in-state kid. So same deal from an in-state and from a family member. He grew up, brother played for LSU. It means something tremendously for him to get that offer. So you probably want to be a little bit more careful because when you throw that offer, it's very susceptible to be committed upon, almost immediately, traditionally,
Yeah, so it makes if you like Josh just explained, if you've worked in recruiting and understood in-state recruiting, it makes complete sense why they were a little slow on the kid. But again, it ended up working out. Let's go to the film here.
Yeah. Now why everybody else missed on him, I don't know, because to be honest, I don't really remember his recruitment at all.
I don't either. I wouldn't really.
Can you give me some height weight? You got any height weight on him?
At a high school, 6'2", 180. At a high school listed on the recruiting service.
He looks it. He looks it.
The thing that stands out to me, to his film to me when I'm watching, is his ability to just create separation. You saw that in 2019, his year with Joe Burrow. You gave Joe Burrow a little bit of room. He's going to put it on you. But it's just really his initial quicks, like on this kickoff, I remember right. Just makes it's just initial quicks, just the one move. Whoop, just kind of slippery and a little bit of burst, acceleration, he's gone.
I mean, he's kind of, and for us, just to provide some context, he kind of has that, I mean, just right out the gate, that prototype height, weight, anything over 6 foot would kind of piques our interest. 6'2", 180, you get that kind of height weight distribution where a little bit longer limbed, high waist, you get to see, kind of that prototype, receiver that we're kind of looking for. Then the NFL's
look how fluid. You always forget. Look how fluid this literally looks like the stuff you saw at LSU. Like how just he gets off the line of scrimmage, gets on people's toes real fast. And that last play right there we just watched catches it, is a little underthrown, had him beat, has to come back and make a play. Shows balance, body control to stay on his feet, turn and score. It was just
away from his body. Yeah,
playing a little DB there for you, Murr.
Physicality, yeah, but yeah, just long, lanky, smooth. You see the initial quickness, the ability to separate, the speed. He's faster than everybody. Catch away, good balance, body control, contort. He can contort, go up and get the ball. Yeah, it is pretty incredible to watch because the thing that's funny is that with all of these guys that we've watched the last 2 weeks is that they're doing the same things that they're doing in the NFL in high school, right? It's just they look the same, right? They're right there, and like from our point of view from an evaluator, right? Like we're looking for things. We're looking for confirmation, right? Like we're looking for the ability to confirm that he can do things, that we want him to do. So,
Murph, what's the line you always use, and I always take it to heart, and always like how you said, recruiting is risk management. If you want to go dive in a little bit more on that to explain to people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's just every in my opinion, every recruit kind of carries a degree of risk with them, and our job as an evaluator is to determine how much risk they carry, right? So that's why it's important. If I have 3 or 4 years to look at you and evaluate you, I can determine your risk, and I can find different ways to assess that. So from a recruit, height, weight, speed, all those things, a bunch is kind of like an onion. You can kind of keep peeling back the layers on what goes into the risk management of a player and of an evaluation, as a recruit. But for a receiver, just watching them, he checks the height, weight, box. He checks the ability to catch with his hands, to catch away from his body, to contort, to go up and get the ball. His hand-eye coordination is good. His toughness, he plays both ways. He plays DB. You see him blocking. He puts guys, on the ground blocking. He's tenacious with it. Right here, it's a little choppy, but I'm pretty sure he just depleted somebody. So you see the toughness, you see the physicality, you see the speed, you see the initial quickness, you see the ability to catch, contort, you see the hand-eye, coordination, the ball skills. So from a risk management standpoint, as a prospect, check across the board, kind of giving you everything. And then what we would do is, all right, let's check the grades. Where does that fall in line with stuff? Let's check the
This is funny right here too, Murph. I just saw his grades. He committed August 8th and enrolled August 9th that same year. So literally, he was a late ad, and that was during the 25 initial time. So you still had that. So they thought this in-state prospect at a bigger high school, Destrehan, if you're not familiar in recruiting, one of the bigger high schools, most known high schools in the state of Louisiana. LSU, after seeing him in person, I'm sure multiple times, balling out as a 7-on-7 camp, matching up with this film, they thought it was worth the risk waiting that late to add him to that 17 roster. They thought he could get his grades in order. And I mean, in that state, yes, probably if LSU really wants to.
Is that a private school?
Destrehan, I do not believe so. Nope.
No. This is. I don't want to be, conspiracy theory. That's an odd. If I were just to uncover, if I were to stumble upon what you just said in like a manila folder and read it, I would say that's an odd series of.
Yeah, I'm looking at his 247 from high school. August 8th, 2017, he commits. August 8th, he signs his letter of intent. August 9th, enrolls at Louisiana State University.
But even across the board, like if you know, I'm going to sound like Brian Windhorst, conspiracy theorist.
Brian Windhorst.
Yeah, like if you know anything about recruiting, and again, if I were to just stumble upon the information you just said in a manila folder and just found it, I would find everything you just said to be a little perplexing and kind of curious. Like it doesn't really check out, right? Like to be even across the field, right? Like even to have other collegiate interests, right? To be the brother of a former 4-star guy who played in the SEC, to be the height weight production that he is, to have the grades to get a Northwestern, but not enroll to the last minute. Like, there are things that are kind of like, you would think he would have been a bigger, more well-known guy, because the things that are kind of our stopgaps should have been checked and been alerted. You know what I mean? Like it's interesting that he was not a more well-known guy, and then he fell to.
And I think perception-wise, people think it's like people missed on an eval when you hear people like, yeah, the 2-3-star kid that went to LSU became a big star. It's like you talk to people around, they're like, dude, it wasn't the ability or the film at the time. He checked all those boxes. It was like you said, he was rated low and didn't have many offers because I think many people knew he had grade issues, if I had to guess, and they knew if it ever got resolved, they knew where he was going.
I'm about to say does all right for two things, and again, I don't know if people are. I'm not trying to stir up anything. I'm just curious. So one, I didn't know that, and I should know this because I worked at Georgia. I didn't know that Buford hadn't sent anybody to Georgia in like 11 years. Did you know that?
Who was the last guy? Isaac Nada?
So I don't know if they count him because he went
to IMG, but the only.
And now they got Dylan Viola or whatever.
Did he go back to Buford his senior year? I totally forgot.
I don't think so. But I say that to say that was surprising to me. Like I was like, oh wow, to the point where it seems intentional, right? Like when you hear that, you're like, oh, there must be something there, right? Like it's too coincidental for a powerhouse school of that nature to not. And I'm almost insinuating, I don't know, because I don't know, but it's almost like the state of Louisiana and Destrehan or whatever kind of kept JJ hidden a little bit intentionally.
Yeah.
Because they wanted him to go to LSU, and that was the goal. And we're not trying to have him, out and about going anywhere else. Like
I'm sure. Yeah, the head coach not really floating that out there. Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. Like him have the grade to get the Northwestern offer, which again, if you know anything about Northwestern, they throw out like 72 offers a year, the lowest in the country, and they don't just throw out offers to anybody. So like that it doesn't check out unless like it's like, hey, I don't know. It's just it's an odd set of information. I don't know.
So transitioning a little away from Justin Jefferson here and talking about the position in general. Murph, you worked in two different conferences. Obviously, Georgia, Southeastern Conference. This is what this podcast is built around, the SEC. But obviously, Washington, the most premier Pac-12 school in the country when you were working there under Chris Peterson. In your opinion, I'd like to hear it from, and it could be the same position, in the SEC at Georgia and in the Pac-12 at Washington. I say this because I think wide receiver is one of the easiest transitions from high school to college. Did you notice any different positions here from a standpoint from the SEC to Washington in the Pac-12 where you thought a position transitioned differently a little bit? If that makes sense. I say that because we're watching a receiver here. I mean, he's playing DB right now, but Justin Jefferson's the receiver. But like, I always thought receiver and running back were the easiest transition positions, I would say, to immediately get on the field as a freshman at a school in like the SEC.
You're saying if I have a different one or
did you notice in the Pac-12, was there any position that you like? I thought that could more so than the SEC in the Pac-12, you could get away maybe a freshman could get away with it a little bit more playing in the offensive line in the Pac-12 compared to going in as a true freshman in the offensive line in the SEC. And again, it's happened. Jonah Williams has started as a true freshman. Larry Tunzel is in these offensive line positions. But I'm saying for the most part, did you notice I noticed a lot more freshmen play at the defensive line in the Pac-12 than they do the SEC, or it could be any position, for example?
That actually may be true. And that kind of goes back to what we said last week, where it's just like the volume of big bodies is lacking on the West Coast, just as an entire entity or as a whole, right? So like it's quicker to see the field on the West Coast just because there's less competition, right? You can be, one of a few guys and really get thrown in the mix a little bit quicker than maybe, in the SEC or the Southeast where, you got more competition because there's just more people out there to be, competing with. But I do think it is interesting, like receivers and I think just the rise of 707, has made that transition. Quarterbacks, receivers, right? I think it's a lot easier for those guys to come in college and kind of pick up on the terminology and pick up on kind of the chemistry that kind of, goes into that position. And I think that's why you've seen, freshmen kind of come in collegiately and kind of, it's kind of like the NFL, right? You get the pick in the first round, you're kind of expected to start. Freshmen now, collegiately, unless you're, going to a certain kind of echelon of school, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, blah, blah, blah. Freshmen, 4-star, 5-star quarterbacks, unless the guy's a returning starter that's kind of entrenched in that position, they come in with some sort of expectation to compete kind of right away, right? Like there's not a lot of, hey, we'll see the guy in 2-3 years. Like, no, you most times you expect to see the guy in a year or two, or he's probably gone, right? So
in today's time, yeah,
right. So I think my last year at UW, we did last 2 years, maybe last year, we did a really good job with our receivers. And, like one of the big things they always say is like building the receiver rooms, like building a basketball room, right? Like you're trying to get a little bit of everything. And, we had Roma Dunze, who's that bigger kind of, small forward, power forward, bigger body guy, go up and get it. We had, Jalen McMillan, who's that kind of smoother, small forward, slender, smooth. So, that kind of guy, Puka Nakua, and he just got drafted. So, those guys.
Murph, you're telling the people out there about the kind of a basketball lineup a lot of people look for in their wide receiver position group, correct?
Yeah.
Like the stature, like you want the point guard. I mean, if you want to explain it.
Yeah, just kind of if you're an offensive coordinator, the best thing you can do is attack a defense in as many ways as possible, right? So if I have a different skill set across the board, then I can keep you off balance and I can do I can do things to make sure that you're playing honest and you're playing a different style of defense. So if I'm building my receiver room with having a whole bunch of guys that can do a bunch of different things, it's harder for you to defend, and it keeps you off balance, and it makes you play a way that maybe keeps you on your toes a little bit. So receiver, having a smaller, shiftier guy who I can get the ball and just let him do his deal, more of a gadget guy, kind of a smaller guy, because it's a deal where typically there's an inverse ratio of the bigger you get, the slower you also get, right? So you get the smaller, shiftier gadget guy, get the ball, let him do his deal, kind of a jitterbug. That's maybe a 1 more of a point guard, and you get your 2 more of a shooting guard guy. It's a more of a run after catch, thicker guy. Maybe like a running back like Brandon Ayuk, kind of different style. Deebo Samuel, maybe he's more within that mold now. 3 that's slender, more small forward, route runner. Guy can separate footwork. Justin Jefferson is probably in that mold. That kind of that 3. If you're looking at a basketball equivalent, can separate, catch away from his body. 4. More of that power forward, go up and get the ball. N'Keal Harry, Alshon Jeffrey, bigger body guys that you feel, Keenan Allen, those type of guys are guys that that can do a little bit of a mismatch with their size. And then 5, if you look at the pass catchers as a whole, that's your tight end, right? So tight end, has the ability to be a threat in the pass game. That's your center equivalent and Brock Bowers type guy. And obviously he's kind of the unicorn, but a guy that can kind of do it all as a pass catcher.
And before we get out, we're trying to transition to our defensive player, getting off wide receivers. But I was listening to Jim Nagy today. He said, what do you think was the one attribute from a receiver that he thought transitioned over pretty regularly from from a college receiver that he evaluated to the NFL, that he thought was very like, hey, if you could do this at the college level, it usually translated to the NFL?
Like drop rate? I don't know what
he said. Yards after contact and kind of like yards after the catch. Kind of like if you break tackles outside on the edge, he's like that usually transitioned to the NFL too.
I've seen like move the sticks. We'll talk about that a lot, like the yak yardage and the rack yardage and how they look into that, and how like Brandon Ayuk coming out, I think, was one of those big guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big deal with the 49ers. I think they've built a lot.
I think you hear yards after contact, and for most people and myself, sometimes you think of running back, but also like on the edges now with these now screens, these bubble screens. I mean, it's a big deal, like you said, Brandon Ayuk from the 49ers. That's one of their things.
Deebo Samuel. Right.
Yeah.
And that gets into a whole different conversation of kind of positionless football. Because that's essentially what the Niners, and as you get into positionless basketball, positionless football, those are kind of,
It's like you said, Murph, that's kind of what the NBA game is now. They just they want the 4 and 5 guys to extend,
right?
Shoot a lot, you'd be able to shoot a lot of threes, like
doing things that you weren't, traditionally asked to do. But now with the way you can build things out, the more versatile you are, the more your 4 and your 5s can stretch out and maybe bang down low, but also pull your guy out, outside, make him defend a 3-pointer. That makes it harder to do. And the more you can translate that philosophy in basketball into football, I think that's what you're seeing teams like the 49ers do when you have Ayuk and you have Deebo and Kittle and McCaffrey. Like they all simultaneously can all kind of play running back, receiver, like they're all kind of interchangeable, right? And that's the thing that's makes it really hard to defend. So,
well, Justin Jefferson, fun watch again for anybody who's listening. It thought he was underranked, or it had nothing to do from hearing from people at LSU. Had nothing to do with his ability. Camped well. They saw him multiple times. They liked his film. It was just some great issues that they got fixed last minute that he enrolled late. But enrolling to our last guy of the night. Moving to the defensive side of the ball, but we're going to go to the line of scrimmage. Murph, a Georgia kid, one of the more impressive films of all time. People may consider him one of the bigger busts of all time if you want to take into his NFL stuff. Robert Nkemdiche, defensive end for the 2013 class. I believe the number 1 overall player in the entire class. Grayson High School, went to Ole Miss, was a part of that incredible Ole Miss class, top 3 class. I mean, he was in that class with who was it? Laquan Treadwell, Laramie Tunzel, Evan Ingram, him. That class that put Ole Miss from 14, 15, kind of 16 to the whole Freeze stuff went about, kind of put them on the map. And that was the class that springboarded Hugh Freeze's career at Ole Miss, but he was a part of that. No, I'm looking at it right now.
Subsequent career at Auburn as well.
No, Murph, this is a good one too. Top 5 highest rated player ever coming out of high school.
Who are the other 4?
I need to go look it up, but that was in his article about him, Michael being one of the bigger busts of all times. Was top 5 highest rated player ever. What do you remember from Nkemdiche, Murphy? You're a Georgia guy. I feel like I have some. I think you heard more about Robert Nkemdiche once he got to college in his later years, and in the NFL more so than you just thought he was. He was a beast. I mean, we're about to put the film on. The guy plays running back, plays defensive end, but they also slide him in to play a 3-tech at times too. I mean,
what year was this? 2013, you said?
2013 class here, number 1 overall player. Remember, he had his brother who went to Ole Miss before him, so that was the Ole Miss connection too. Denzel played safety,
and he played he played.
He was a good player. Yeah, more of an in the box kind of dime back. He'd hang around there, but he'd make plays like in the flat on running backs, tight ends, stuff like
kind
that.
of safety nickel, linebacker.
Right. He was a good college player.
Yeah. No, I think Nkemdiche was. I think that was my first year working at Georgia. Like that signing day was my first. Like maybe I've been working there like a month. Like maybe that was my first cycle. So that means as a fan, I was more on the fan side of things throughout most of his recruitment. But I just remember how chaotic it was. He was Grayson, is that right? Or Buford?
Grayson. Rams, baby.
Yeah. So big time recruitment. I think Ole Miss was a shocker at the time. I think everybody assumed Georgia, everybody assumed Florida, Alabama.
But the brother was older, so he was there already. So that helped.
He was there, and that helped. Yeah. But at the time, Ole Miss going in to get the number 1 player and all those 5 stars was unheard of. And it wasn't happening at that kind of like, with it, it was. I remember it was a shocker for sure.
Hell, remember Ole Miss lost. I remember Georgia lost the battle for Laramie Tunzel. It was between Georgia and Ole Miss.
I know, and hey, to this day, I still say I found a little secret. I found a secret little folder of film that I still think was all the commitments that Georgia had that it ended up getting, and it was like Tunsil and Derrick Henry and just like a who's who of.
I'll still stay till this day. Mark Richt never gets fired. This is all totally off topic. Mark Richt never gets fired if they end up taking Deshaun Watson over Bryce Ramsey.
That's a whole different conversation. That's a whole.
You just made me go back into the memory of like us looking at those evals and just being like, now Bryce Ramsey's the punter.
No, I know that's a whole different conversation. But it is true, and it is interesting, and it is kind of a window into how even the best people at the world at this can be wrong and make just wrong evals and see things.
It's hard. I mean, you're guessing. You're making hypothetical hypotheses on human beings. Like Jalen Hurts is one of the few, the proud, it checks every off the field box.
Oh, Jalen Hurts, yeah, he checks every box, and I think
he's a unicorn almost from that perspective.
Well, the thing is too is like, and the thing that it was held against him was he was 6'1", right? Listed as 6'2" at the draft. He's 6'1", so he was. Which is interesting because it was probably a time when like Russell Wilson was performing at a high level in the league. So you would thought that would have relaxed a little bit in terms of that skill set. But you feel like it was probably held against him a little bit, right? That he wasn't prototype, so to speak, right?
But Murph, to Nkemdiche here, Robert Nkemdiche, the thing that's funny to me with Ole Miss here before we get into the film is him and Greg Hardy almost remind me just a little bit of like, man, all the ability in the world. But I mean, they're a little bit different players. But both played defensive line for Ole Miss. Both had all the ability in the world, but just it was the off the field stuff. It just kept them in trouble all the time. It's just funny. Both went to the same university. Both had all the ceiling in the world. but just could not keep it together. And that's not to say that's anybody's fault. There's two different coaching staffs at Ole Miss, so you're not really blaming anybody. But it is just funny. It's like, dang, like Greg Hardy was a beast, dude. And that guy was actually locked in, ready to play. So was Robert Nkemdiche when he was locked in, ready to play.
Right.
No, all right, here we got a little YouTube for Robert Nkemdiche. This is 2012 season highlights right here. So there's a little mixture for everybody watching out there. Some defensive end. I think it rotates between being on the defensive line and playing. He did play running back as well, so he played both ways.
And I think, one of the things when I was watching this tape earlier that stands out is
Murph, just so we know, listed here. Let me get my notes here. For Robert Nkemdiche, at a high school, listed 6'4", 285.
Okay. He well, yeah, and that's the thing, like, and he's every bit of it, right? Like, that's the thing that stands out. I think the big thing that people maybe don't understand about watching tape is that, like, it's like an ongoing process where, oh my God, the more you watch, you kind of just stack evaluations on top of each other, and you build kind of a database of, all right, well, here's the barometer. Well, this guy's better than this guy, and well, this guy's better than that guy, and you kind of build a baseline of what is what. And for a lot of guys in high school, if you go back and you look at Clowney, if you look at Josh Sweat, if you look at some of these guys that are kind of like these, Myles Garrett is a little bit different. But like they're traditionally lankier, longer, have the frame, can bend, but aren't necessarily grown men quite yet, but they possess the tools, the frame, the whatever. The thing about Nkemdiche, he looks like he's a grown man already. Like, he looks defined, he looks cut, he looks built, he looks big, and he looks like an SEC player in high school. As a 17-year-old, as an 18-year-old, whatever he is.
Like you said, possesses a lot of natural strength that a lot of kids. I mean, you look at this, his ability to shoot and shed as a high school kid is like unbelievable. I mean, dude, just his violent hands are just going through some of these offensive linemen's chest and just throwing them off like a rag doll.
And that's the thing, the context of what he's doing is such an important element of this. And if you don't know context and you see things, if you just see this independent and you don't see what every other person looks like, you don't necessarily see how great it is, of what he's doing. So for him to be 300 pounds moving, as quick off the ball, with the lateral quickness and the lateral agility, with the short area quickness and the ability to, the quick twitch to get off, the strength, the ability, it's similar when if you look at Vita Vea's film, him playing running back, right? It's rare when you see big guys do things like small people, right? And that's what makes LeBron so great, right? He does things at 6'9", 280, 265, whatever he is, that make it look like he's 6'4", 6'5". And when you have a guy like Vita Vea or Robert Nkemdiche, who, I mean, he's 300 pounds moving like he's 225, right? And he has the ability to break down, stop weight of that much, and then redirect it with such ease and fluidity, right? That he can and such speed behind it. That,
just like you said, the speed to power is unbelievable.
Right. And the strength, like the strength, the hand usage, the contact balance for him, the ability to kind of like just maneuver around that. And it's rare for people to burst out of a cannon like that and to be that heavy, to be that strong, and to be able to bend, and to get flat and run down the line. And it's just, you don't see that very often. And it's unfortunate that his career didn't, click across the board, because he is, in a decade of me watching this tape, he is one of the more physically impressive players that I've ever seen. He's, up there with Myles Garrett of just being able to just like checked every box from he's going to the league,
Well, this brings me to my next question. We're talking about a guy. I mean, obviously you're not, I mean, my wife, Caitlin, downstairs could tell you Robert Nkemdiche is a good player just off watching it. But when is it time to cut bait? I mean, he got drafted, I think, 28th pick overall by the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, he had all the college. I mean, jumped 15 feet out of an apartment building when they were at the Peach Bowl about to play TCU when they were at Ole Miss. Like, Murph, in your opinion, like, and I know these NFL teams have more information than what me and you were talking about, but we knew he had some issues, him and his brother both. When is it time to cut bait where it's like, hey, man, the risk isn't worth the reward? I know this guy's a freak show, but he just has shown patterns throughout his college career through people that we trust, through trusted sources, that just like, he's just not going to take care of his business. Like, when is that? Or are you always like, do you edge a little bit towards like, hey, like he's at least worth like we're dealing with a little bit like Jimbo Fisher always used to say, like, hey, if he's showing up on Saturday, we'll deal with the stuff Monday through Friday or Sunday through Friday. Like, when is that kind of risk worth a reward? Like, the Cardinals drafted him so late, you knew all the off the field stuff. I mean, and again, I mean, if this guy was a Jalen Hurts, checked the box, played for his dad, did everything right, he's the number one overall pick probably in the draft. Like, but he's 28. Like, it's interesting, the GMs and stuff. I know owners push certain things and stuff too, but when is that line? It's maybe different for everybody.
Yeah, I think the context matters more than anything. Like instance,
would a Robert Nkemdiche, if you were the Arizona Cardinals, if you're like, hey, we like his ability, let's take off the football stuff. Is he going to be okay by himself out here in Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale, Arizona? Or this guy's a big partier. It's a pretty big party scene out here. Like, well, it's stuff like.
The thing is with the Cardinals is that, like, and I'm pretty sure it's probably Steve Keim at that point. Like, he has had a history of questionable picks himself, and I think that's where it gets like, and he's no longer employed by them. I think because of it. That to me is the bigger thing. It's like even being self-aware of your own picks, right? Like he's taking a risk on a guy who in Nkemdiche, everybody, like you said, your wife in 30 seconds can tell you he looks like a football player. He looks like a good football player, right? Like, it doesn't take anything of any kind of like football acumen to know that Robert Nkemdiche possesses football talent. But across the board, he had a kind of a wonky recruitment. He had a kind of a not necessarily fully reached college career, and he fell in the draft not because of his potential, right? So at some point, to me, it's like, if you're you got to just be aware of who you are. Like, if you're the Patriots and we have a history of taking guys and maybe getting it right, and we can get it right, sure. But like the Cardinals aren't that guy, right? You're not that guy, right? And to me, it's like when you have questionable picks yourself and you're bringing more questionable picks, it's like that's not the environment to put that person in. But if you are a place, and we all know what they are, like the thing is, like, top-down ownership exists, right? Like it starts at the top, and the reason the same teams are consistently good every year is because the ownership is consistently good every year, and it's the same teams every year that are kind of in the conversation. And even when they're not good, they're still doing things the right way, if that makes sense. So like the Patriots, the Steelers, right? Getting outside of football, the Heat. There are certain organizations that do things the right way every single year, and you feel comfortable with them taking a Nkemdiche, or maybe them taking a red flag, because it's just like, hey, we know who we are, and you're either. I mean, look at what happened to Antonio Brown as soon as he got out of Pittsburgh, right? Like, I mean, just the train wreck of what happened as soon as he left. That was completely, quieted for. He had an unquestioned Hall of Fame career before he got traded to the Raiders, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, well, what happened? So I think certain places can take risks. I think certain organizations can take risks. I think you got to know who you are, and I think you got to know what your track record is and where your time frame is. Like, I think all that stuff's relevant, and certain places, certain people, certain whatever can take those chances and those risks at certain times because they have the infrastructure, they have the foundation, they have the fundamental, whatever around it. But I would say the Cardinals were not that place. They haven't been that place. It was not a good situation for him. Had he gone to Seattle out the gate, would maybe been a little bit different, right? Pete Carroll, John Schneider, Seattle culture maybe would have been better for him. Same division.
That's what they were talking about with Jalen Carter this past year, right? Maybe him being sent to Seattle, being in that that good culture. It's like you said. I mean, to sum it up, like you said, it's all about culture. Like, does he fit your culture? Or it's like Randy Moss. He was a big issue before he ever went to New England. When he went to New England, you never heard much from Randy Moss, except his on the field ability, his on field play.
I love Randy Moss. He's my guy.
Well, Murph, you got anything else to add for the old Robert Nkemdiche? I mean, he's one of the bigger case studies where it's like, guys, this guy was a total freak show on the field. Would kind of play the field stuff, got in trouble. A guy that you read articles that guys around Arizona now, they thought he showed up every year he was with Arizona overweight. Just stuff like that. But again, he's a guy you'll never forget if you paid attention to college football recruiting prospects, especially in the Southeast with guys like him. I mean, you can't forget about Robert Nkemdiche.
What's crazy is that, and I know probably he did reap the benefits of it more than is publicly realized, but in today's recruiting, he would have made so much more money and had so much more. His story probably would have ended the same, but he probably would have had so much more money than he got exposed to at the time. Because, I mean, really just looking at his tape, we go back to, we can pull back Derek Brown, you can pull back, Nkemdiche, Myles Garrett. There's not a lot of guys that play in defensive line is different, right? Because there's a twitch and there's an athleticism, there's a fluidity, and there's a strength. Like, really good D linemen in high school stand out because they're big, fast, strong, fluid, right? And his tape, Clowney, right? His tape is up there with those type of guys. So, he had as much potential as anybody that we've seen within our career. And I think it just goes to show you how much the mental element, having your head on right and having the right, kind of outlook and the right kind of disposition can play a role. Because to watch him and Hurts in the same kind of ecosystem and see somebody who really maximized what they have versus somebody who really kind of just coasted with what they had, and kind of see one become the highest paid, whatever his position, and then one kind of fizzle out when he really probably should be, maybe towards the tail end of his prime is really just kind of an interesting kind of insight into how much the mental, element plays a role here.
Yeah, and I don't think you meant to tag it up, but it is funny. Like, just wrapping this up before we get out of here. Like you said, all the off the field stuff, check the boxes for Jalen Hurts compared to the Robert Nkemdiche, who had more upside and probably more potential out of high school, but just didn't have the off the field stuff or the discipline to come into camp in correct shape. And just, it's funny, you're comparing two different players that are on opposite ends of the spectrum in that. But
I mean,
I'm glad it ended up working out. We did both those guys at the same time because it's good conversations to dissect.
Right.
But Murph, appreciate you joining us, man. Again, every Thursday, if you tweet at me or Josh at Recruiting 101, Murph, am I correct on that?
Yeah. Well, Josh Murphy, CFP, Recruiting 101. Yeah.
Perfect. And then tweet at me if you want specific guys. We're open to that. Anybody you want evaluated, talk about, get more into kind of mix it up the storylines and at the same time the actual evaluation, what people are looking for at certain positions. But Josh, appreciate you joining us, man. We look forward to seeing you next Thursday for another edition of Scout School, brother.
Thank you, man. Have a good night. Later.
You too, man. All right, guys, again, Josh Murphy joining us from Recruiting 101. Good conversations, great time of year to open up the Rolodex in the head and remember some of these guys. And again, we didn't mean to do Jalen Hurts and Robert Nkemdiche on the same night, but again, it's perfect timing to talk about the off the stuff field matters, man. You having the discipline, taking care of your business day to day. Always heard Jalen Hurts had no social life really at Alabama, lived in the facility. And Robert Nkemdiche had all the ability in the world, but again, just didn't take care of his business off the field, low motor guy. Just it goes to show you, it's not just all the ability on the field. You got to take care of your stuff off the field, especially when you're trying to go make it in the NFL where everybody's good. But let's get to a couple fan questions in here before we get out of here. Fan question. I had one text in. I didn't know who it was. It was just a number. And then I had one tweeted to me yesterday. But we'll start with the tweet. First, Fan question is Kirby Smart losing control of his program the same way Fulmer lost control at Tennessee? This is from @MajorDickWinners. Major Winners, I appreciate you tweeting in. I appreciate you tweeting in the question and listening to the show. I wouldn't say so. I mean, this is how it is usually in most programs. It's usually not as bad as you think, and it's usually not as good as you think. And if you're out there casting stones at other programs, it's probably happening in your building as well. I know it's a different sport, but the Nate Oates, Brandon Miller stuff during the season with the whole Darius Miles murder stuff with Brandon Miller bringing the gun in the car for the untimely death. I mean, Nate Oates took a lot of it, but you also didn't see a lot of the other SEC coaches coming out and condemning it because you know what? It could be your program tomorrow. So the day you just make fun of other schools for having disciplinary issues, it could be your program at the same time. So I wouldn't say he's losing control. I mean, it does seem like the AJC out there is in a battle. I mean, I don't know if there's two bigger battles out there in the entire world right now. I mean, including Russia, United States, whatever it is from a political standpoint. The AJC versus Georgia football and AL.com against Alabama basketball. I don't know. But to answer your question, Major Winners, I would have to go back and look at the Tennessee stuff under Fulmer. I know they named a cup for him, the Fulmer Cup, for all the stuff Tennessee used to get in trouble with when he was there, off the field stuff in the summer. I mean, Georgia just seems like they got to get some of the speeding and street racing stuff under control. But I'm not informed enough to really make a decision on that. But look in the mirror a little bit. It's not always as good as it seems. It's always not as bad. It's not always as bad as it seems. Just keep it that. And then the final question I got was from 228-617-5956. Whoever you are, that is a Mississippi Gulf Coast number. Whoever that is, I appreciate the question. But the question is, do you think Ole Miss defense will be improved under Pete Golden? So again, the question, do you think that Ole Miss defense will be improved under new defensive coordinator Pete Golden? If you're not familiar, Pete Golden was Alabama's DC since 2018. Just came over to Ole Miss. He did, from what I understand, leave himself, some personal issues, just change of scenery. Will he be better? Or will Ole Miss defense improve? I mean, it's going to have to be improved, right? I mean, it wasn't a great defense last year under Chris Partridge. Some of it, though, I don't know how much improved because I don't really like the personnel in the back end. And now with teams going empty and 10 personnel, like you're playing 5, 6, 7 DBs. Obviously not 7 DBs at a time, but you're going to play 5 or 6. You got to be deeper in the secondary more so than ever. And a lot of people aren't, just because you're not in the top 7, 8 kids are transferring that want to play. And right now, Ole Miss had a bunch of transfers out. They had a bunch of guys transfer out on the back end of their secondary. I don't really like the personnel. I think a lot of people are going to go attack that. I do like some of the guys they brought in up front. If I'm Pete Golden, I'm going to bring some simulated pressures and force some turnovers. I can't just sit back there and relax. I think at times he didn't bring enough pressure. Sometimes he was dropping Will Anderson into space to cover his time at Alabama when Will Anderson should have been pinning his ears back. Pete Golden got a lot of flack at Alabama. I think some of it was, from everything I understood, guys like Kirby Smart, guys like Jeremy Pruitt, guys like Kevin Steele, worked with Nick Saban before, they're willing to go tell Nick Saban what he doesn't want to hear. Behind closed doors, they would never embarrass him in a staff meeting, but behind closed doors, they would tell him, hey, coach, I know you may want to run this package, but they're going to pick us apart. I always heard Pete Golden was more of the yes man standpoint. And that's why the defense slacks a little bit. Nick Saban, he's the greatest of all time college football coach. He's the greatest college football coach of all time, at least from this era. But even he's wrong at times. He's wrong at times, just like every other human. So he needs to be checked. And that's why you hire those coordinators to tell you stuff you don't want to hear at times. I don't really think Pete was overly vocal about telling him stuff. It's like, hey, coach, if you want to do this, we'll do it, whether it was right or wrong or the betterment of the program. But to answer your question, will Ole Miss's defense be better? I don't think they could have went and hired a defensive coordinator with a better resume or pedigree. I think they have a chance to be better. I don't think if they're worse, it's Pete Golden's fault. I just think the personnel in the back end is just not very good right now. So to answer your question, I would lean to be a little bit better. Probably just, I think he knows what he's getting into, but I don't think it's going to be night and day when you're looking at the stats nationally or in conference or how many points they're giving up. I think there's going to be some games Ole Miss ain't going to look great. I think there's going to be some games, if Pete can get a little creative and scheme and force some more turnovers, they could be fun. I hope that answers your question. But again, next episode is going to be next Thursday, July 4th, next Tuesday. We're not going to have a show on the 3rd on Monday, but we will have another episode on Thursday, another Scout School. Josh will be joining us here. I appreciate you joining us on this episode of Mach 10 Sports. I hope you have a great July 4th weekend, and look forward to seeing you next Thursday.